The farmhouse kitchen smelled of coffee and old wood on the night James Henry Bennett made his final recording. March 2024, 11 o'clock, and the 84-year-old man sat alone at the table where he'd eaten breakfast at 4:30 every morning for 56 years. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the laptop camera, but his voice came out steady when he pressed record. I, James Henry Bennett, am of sound mind making these decisions freely without pressure from anyone. If you're watching this, Cole, it means I didn't get the chance to explain in person, and I'm sorry for that. Outside the window behind him, headlights appeared on the county road. The car slowed, stopped 200 yards from the property line, engine idling in the darkness. Hank noticed but kept recording. The headlights stayed there for 3 full minutes before the vehicle drove away. They're coming for what I protected, Hank said to the camera. Not just the land, the truth. He paused, looked directly into the lens with eyes that had witnessed things most men never would. Behind those eyes lived memories of a federal courtroom in 1994, of 3 men in expensive suits sitting at the defense table, of the middle one with cold gray eyes who'd leaned forward when the verdict was read and mouthed 5 words across the gallery. You'll regret this, Bennett. 30 years had passed since that day. Richard Caldwell had spent 15 of those years in federal prison. Hank had spent them waiting, watching, knowing that men like Caldwell never forgot and never forgave. The weight doesn't get lighter, Hank said to his grandson through the camera. You get stronger, and sometimes you have to carry weight for people who can't carry it themselves. He sealed the USB drive in an envelope marked "For Cole," open when you're ready, placed it in a wooden box alongside an FBI witness protection badge from 1990. A red leather notebook secured with a small padlock, and documents that detailed 3 years of systematic harassment disguised as business correspondence. The headlights returned at 11:45. This time they stayed longer. Hank turned off the kitchen light and watched from the darkness. The vehicle sat there for 10 minutes before finally driving away. He made a note of the time in a small journal he kept by the window, then went upstairs to bed. 3 weeks later, his heart stopped at 4:15 in the morning. The county coroner ruled it natural causes. Heart failure at 84 after a lifetime of hard labor, raised no suspicions and generated no investigation. The death certificate was signed and filed. The funeral was scheduled. And 500 miles away in Denver, Cole Bennett received a phone call that would unravel everything he thought he understood about his family and himself. 6 months later, October became the month of reckoning. St. Michael's Church in Ridgway, Colorado smelled of white lilies and old hymn books on the morning they buried Hank Bennett. The sanctuary held maybe 60 people, which was respectable for a man who'd spent the last decade of his life working land instead of socializing in town. Cole sat in the front pew with his daughter Harper pressed against his side, both of them dressed in clothes that felt wrong for the occasion, because funeral clothes always felt wrong, like costumes for a play no one wanted to perform. Harper was 9 years old and small for her age. She wore a navy dress with white flowers that she'd picked herself because her mother had said she was old enough to make those decisions now. Around her thin shoulders, she'd wrapped one of Hank's old work shirts, the fabric soft from decades of washing, the sleeves rolled up 6 times and still hanging past her fingertips. She clutched a single white chrysanthemum in both hands because she'd seen it done that way in a movie once and thought it looked respectful. Cole was 34 and felt every one of those years like stones in his pockets. His suit was the same one he'd worn to his divorce hearing 8 months ago, the fabric carrying memories of the worst day of his life until this one came along to compete for the title. He tried to focus on Pastor Frank Morrison's eulogy, but his mind kept circling back to the phone call 3 days ago. Your grandfather passed in his sleep. Heart failure. 84 years and gone like a candle in wind. The call had come at 6 in the morning to Cole's one-bedroom apartment in Denver. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a fold-out couch where Harper slept every other weekend, according to the custody agreement that Kristen's lawyer had drawn up with surgical precision. The apartment was in a building where the elevator broke twice a month, and the neighbors above him played music until 2 in the morning. It was the best he could afford after the divorce took half of everything, and the layoff from TechCore Solutions took his income. 8 months since Kristen's lawyer handed him papers that detailed exactly how thoroughly he'd failed as a husband. 6 months since the 3rd round of layoffs at TechCore had finally reached his department, 27 software engineers let go in a single afternoon, with 2 weeks severance and a form letter thanking them for their service. 3 days since the only man who'd ever looked at Cole without disappointment had died alone in a farmhouse 5 hours away. Pastor Morrison read from Ecclesiastes about time and seasons. Cole barely heard the words. His attention kept drifting to the back of the church where his uncle Marcus sat beside his wife Carolyn. Marcus was Hank's younger son, 56 years old, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Cole's monthly rent. He'd flown in from Phoenix yesterday and hadn't bothered to visit the farmhouse or help with any of the arrangements. Now he sat checking his phone every few minutes, thumb scrolling with the distracted urgency of a man handling important business. Caroline leaned close to whisper something. Marcus nodded without looking up from his screen. His eyes flicked toward the entrance, then back to his phone, checking for someone, Cole realized, waiting for an arrival. Harper tugged at his sleeve. Daddy, why does Uncle Marcus keep looking at the door? Cole had no answer for that. The sanctuary door opened 15 minutes into the eulogy. The sound cracked through the church like a gunshot, loud enough that Pastor Morrison stopped mid-sentence and every head in the congregation turned to look. The woman who entered moved with the controlled aggression of someone who'd interrupted proceedings before and would do it again without hesitation. She wore a navy suit tailored to intimidate, platinum blonde hair cut sharp at the jaw, heels that clicked against the stone floor with mechanical precision. In her left hand, she carried a leather briefcase. In her right hand, she carried a manila folder. She walked down the center aisle without apology or acknowledgement of the disruption she'd caused. The clicking of her heels measured out the seconds like a countdown. 20 feet from the altar, she stopped. Her eyes found Cole with laser focus, and when she spoke, her voice carried the flat certainty of someone accustomed to legal confrontations. I need to speak with the heir. 900 acres, we have contractual obligations that can't wait. The church fell into the sharp, uncomfortable silence of something deeply wrong unfolding in real time. Pastor Morrison stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Ma'am, this is a funeral service. Whatever business you have can wait until we've honored the deceased. The woman didn't acknowledge him. Her eyes stayed locked on Cole. Mr. Bennett, I presume. Victoria Crane, Ridgewood Estates Development Association. We should talk soon. Your grandfather made decisions that affect significant investments. She stepped closer to the casket. Not to pay respects, to make a point. She placed the manila folder directly on the polished oak surface where Hank lay. The gesture deliberately confrontational. Final offer, $47 million. 72 hours to respond. Then she turned on her heel and walked back down the aisle. The door slammed behind her with the same violence it had opened. The echo lingered in the silence like smoke after gunfire. Harper's small voice cut through the shock. Daddy, why is that lady yelling at a funeral? Cole pulled his daughter close, feeling the protective instinct rise hot in his chest. The one thing the divorce hadn't taken from him was this: the ability to shield her from ugliness. Even when ugliness walked right through the church door and demanded answers to questions he didn't yet understand. Pastor Morrison tried to resume the eulogy, but the moment was broken. The congregation sat in uncomfortable awareness that something significant had just occurred, though most of them lacked context to understand exactly what. Only a few people seemed unsurprised by the interruption. Marcus and Caroline exchanged a look in the back row. Marcus reached for his phone again. The rest of the service blurred into background noise. People stood and said kind things about Hank that Cole barely registered. They sang a hymn his grandfather used to hum while working the fields back when Cole was 12 and spent summers learning what dirt and labor really meant. But Cole's mind kept returning to Victoria Crane, to her certainty, to the way she looked at him like he was an obstacle to be removed rather than a man burying his grandfather. After the service, Cole stepped outside into October sunlight that felt too bright and indifferent for grief. The parking lot stretched across gravel that crunched under dress shoes. Pickup trucks mixed with sedans, the vehicles of farmers and townspeople who'd come to pay respects. Across the lot, Cole spotted Marcus and Caroline standing near a black rental SUV. Their backs were to the church. Marcus gestured with his hands in a pattern that suggested explanation rather than conversation. Caroline nodded along, arms crossed, occasionally interjecting with what looked like clarifications or corrections. Harper saw them first. Her observation carried the innocent clarity only children possess. Daddy, why are they smiling? Aren't we supposed to be sad? Then Victoria Crane approached them. Cole watched the scene unfold from 50 yards away, unable to hear the words but reading the body language with growing understanding. 2 minutes of talking, Marcus nodding slowly, deliberately, then extending his hand, and Victoria shaking it. Not a condolence handshake, a deal handshake. The kind men make when agreements are reached and terms are settled. Caroline immediately pulled out her phone, started typing while glancing back toward the church, toward Cole, making sure he was watching, wanting him to know that whatever had just been agreed upon, he was on the outside of it. A hand touched Cole's shoulder. He turned to find an elderly man in a brown suit standing close enough that Cole could smell coffee and peppermint on his breath. White hair neatly combed, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his gaze to uncomfortable intensity. Cole Bennett? Cole nodded, wary of strangers approaching with purpose on days like this. Samuel Price. I was your grandfather's attorney for 40 years. We need to talk, but not here. Samuel glanced toward the parking lot where Marcus was now on his phone, pacing beside the rental SUV with the agitated energy of someone receiving unwelcome news. You're the sole heir, 900 acres of agricultural land that your grandfather held since 1968. But you need to understand something. The old lawyer paused, choosing his words with the care of a man who'd practiced law long enough to know which truths require gentle delivery. That woman is Victoria Crane. She's been pursuing this land for 3 years. 47 letters, 47 offers to buy. Your grandfather rejected every single one, wrote rejected in red ink on each envelope and sent them back. She stopped asking politely about a year ago. Samuel looked at Marcus and Caroline climbing into their rental car together. And now that he's gone, she's already found people in your family willing to help her get what she wants. The words settled over Cole like a cold fog. He looked down at Harper, who was listening with the intense focus she applied to things she knew were important, even if she didn't fully understand them yet. Samuel reached it into his jacket pocket and produced a small brass key attached to a leather fob. Safety deposit box at First National Bank. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. There are things your grandfather wanted you to have. Things he couldn't tell you while he was alive. Before Cole could ask what that meant, Samuel added one more detail that made the fog thicker. 2 weeks before he died, your grandfather called me, said if anything happened to him, I should tell you to remember 1994. Does that mean anything to you? Cole searched his memory. 1994. He would have been 4 years old. No significant memories from that year surfaced. No, should it? Samuel's expression suggested the answer was complicated. It will. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Don't be late. Then an elderly woman approached. Small frame, fierce expression, moving with the determined stride of someone who decided to say something difficult and wouldn't be deterred. Ruth Sanderson, Cole remembered from childhood summers, his grandfather's neighbor to the east, owner of 300 acres that bordered the Bennett property. Cole, your grandfather gave me something to give you if he died. She glanced around to make sure no one else was close enough to hear. He was very specific. Tell Cole to check the red notebook. Tell him Richard Caldwell is back. The name meant nothing to Cole. Who's Richard Caldwell? Ruth and Samuel exchanged a look heavy with shared knowledge. Come to my office tomorrow, Samuel said. There are things you need to know before you go to that farmhouse. That night, Cole lay awake in his Denver apartment, staring at ceiling tiles that water damage had stained into abstract patterns. Harper slept on the fold-out couch 10 feet away, her breathing soft and steady. Mr. Ears, her stuffed rabbit, was tucked under one arm. She'd cried before bed, quietly, trying to hide it from him because she knew he was barely holding himself together. Cole's laptop sat open on the kitchen table, screen glowing in the darkness. He'd spent 3 hours researching after Harper finally fell asleep. Ridgewood Estates Development Association, Victoria Crane, Crestview Development Corporation. The search results painted a picture that made his stomach tight with dread. Victoria Crane had a real estate broker license in Colorado, worked as VP of Acquisitions for Crestview Development. Professional history showed 20 years in commercial real estate with a focus on agricultural land conversion. Nothing suspicious on the surface. But when Cole dug deeper into Crestview Development, he found something that made him sit up straighter. CEO and founder, Richard Caldwell, incorporated in 2020. Another search for Richard Caldwell, Colorado, brought up newspaper archives from 1994. Federal trial, land fraud syndicate. 3 men convicted, 15 years in federal prison for Richard Caldwell, 12 for Thomas Voss, 10 for Gerald Morse. All 3 convicted of conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering related to systematic harassment of farmers to force land sales. Primary witness for the prosecution, James Henry Bennett. Cole read the articles twice to make sure he understood. His grandfather had testified against these men, put them in prison, entered witness protection for 2 years. The syndicate had collapsed after the convictions. Case closed. Justice served. Except Richard Caldwell had been released in 2009. 15 years reduced to 13 with good behavior. And in 2020, 11 years later, he'd incorporated Crestview Development Corporation with Victoria Crane as his second in command. The same year, Victoria sent her first letter to Hank offering to buy the land. Cole's phone buzzed on the table beside the laptop. Unknown number. He considered letting it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. The clock on the wall showed 11:15. A woman's voice came through, familiar from this morning, though he'd only heard her speak a dozen words. "Mr. Bennett, this is Victoria Crane. I hope I'm not calling too late." Cole's hand tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "I want to help you. I understand this is a difficult time. Losing a grandparent is never easy, but business doesn't stop for grief, and there are matters that require immediate attention." She paused as if waiting for him to agree. When he didn't, she continued, "Your grandfather's property has been the subject of ongoing negotiations for 3 years. He was difficult to work with, refused to accept reality, but you strike me as more pragmatic. A software engineer, analytical mind, you understand numbers. How do you know what I do?" "Did. Past tense. Tech Core Solutions let you go 6 months ago. 3rd round of layoffs. I'm sorry about that. Corporate restructuring is brutal." Cole felt ice water in his veins. She'd been researching him, knew about the layoff, probably knew about the divorce too, knew exactly how vulnerable he was. $47 million, Victoria continued. Cash payment. Closes in 30 days. That's life-changing money, Mr. Bennett. Pay off debts. Buy a house. Provide stability for your daughter. Kristen's lawyer would have to admit you'd created an appropriate environment for custody. Cole's breath caught. She knew about the custody situation. Knew about Kristen's lawyer. Knew everything. "Think about it," Victoria said, her voice taking on a tone that was almost gentle. "You're fighting battles you can't win. Unemployment, debt, custody dispute. One signature solves all of them. $47 million. 72 hours to respond." She hung up before he could tell her what she could do with her offer. Cole sat in the darkness of his apartment, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to dead air. Across the room, Harper shifted in her sleep and made a small sound. Not quite a cry, but close. Having a bad dream, probably. He wanted to go wake her, hold her, promise her everything would be okay. But he couldn't make that promise. Not honestly. Kristen's lawyer had made it clear in their last communication. One more strike, and they'd file for full custody modification. Living in a one-bedroom apartment qualified as questionable judgment. Unemployment qualified as financial instability. Taking Harper to a rundown farmhouse 5 hours from Denver for an indeterminate period would qualify as reckless endangerment. Cole could almost hear the arguments already. "Your Honor, the father has removed the child from her established school environment to live in a property that lacks basic habitability. No stable income, no permanent residence, no ability to provide the consistency this child needs." But that farmhouse wasn't just property. It was Hank's life's work. 56 years of labor condensed into 900 acres of wheat and memory. And Hank had chosen Cole as the one to carry it forward. Not Marcus, not Caroline. Cole, the grandson who'd spent summers learning to drive a combine at age 12. The one who'd bled alongside Hank repairing fences and understood that land wasn't just real estate, it was legacy. The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger. Hank's voice in his memory, teaching him that lesson at 12 years old when Cole had struggled to lift hay bales onto the truck. You get stronger by carrying weight, not by putting it down. Cole closed the laptop and looked at Harper sleeping on the fold-out couch. Her small form barely made a dent in the thin mattress. One hand reached out toward where she thought Mr. Ears should be. Cole picked up the stuffed rabbit from where it had fallen on the floor and tucked it back under her arm. She pulled it close without waking. Tomorrow morning they'd drive to Ridgeway, meet Samuel Price at the bank, open whatever Hank had left in that safety deposit box. Figure out what 1994 meant and who Richard Caldwell was and why his grandfather had spent 3 years fighting a woman who apparently had unlimited resources and no conscience. The next morning arrived with the kind of cold that made breath visible. Cole woke at 5:30 even though he'd barely slept. Harper was already awake, sitting on the edge of the fold-out couch with Mr. Ears in her lap, staring at nothing with the blank expression of a child who'd woken from bad dreams but couldn't remember what they were about. They ate breakfast in silence, cereal from boxes that were half empty, milk that was 2 days from expiration. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, struggling against age and inefficiency. Everything in the apartment felt temporary. Nothing belonged to them in any permanent sense. Even the furniture was rental quality, came with the place, would stay when they inevitably moved somewhere cheaper. The drive to Ridgeway took 4 hours through country that changed as they left Denver's sprawl behind. Flat plains gave way to rolling hills. Housing developments became farmland. Mountains appeared on the horizon like promises of something bigger than the small concerns of small lives. Harper pressed her face to the window and watched the landscape transform. She'd been quiet all morning, processing grief in whatever way 9-year-olds process such things. Finally, somewhere past Fort Collins, she spoke. "Daddy, what happens to the farm if you sell it?" Cole kept his eyes on the highway. They'd turn it into houses, probably. Maybe a golf course. Would great-grandpa be mad? The question hit harder than it should have. Yeah, baby, he would be. Harper processed this in silence for several miles. Then she said something that made Cole's throat tight. Then we can't sell it. Even if it's hard, even if we're scared, great-grandpa trusted you, so I trust you too. First National Bank of Ridgeway occupied a brick building on Main Street that looked like it had stood there since the town's founding. Samuel Price waited in the lobby with a bank officer, both of them dressed in suits despite the Saturday morning timing. Samuel shook Cole's hand with a grip that was stronger than his age suggested. They took Harper with them because leaving her in the lobby felt wrong somehow, like Cole needed her present for whatever discoveries waited in that metal box. The bank officer led them to a private viewing room in the basement. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, a table bolted to the floor. The safety deposit box was larger than expected. Required 2 keys to open. Samuel had one. The bank officer had the other. When the lid came up, Cole saw the contents laid out like pieces of a puzzle he didn't yet know how to assemble. A sealed envelope with Cole's name written in Hank's unmistakable handwriting. A USB drive in a plastic case. A red leather notebook, small enough to fit in a jacket pocket, secured with a tiny padlock. And something that made Harper gasp softly. Was great-grandpa a police officer? The FBI witness protection badge sat in a clear protective case. The metal dulled with age, but the seal still visible. United States Department of Justice. Witness Security Program. Issued to James Henry Bennett. Date, August 1994. Samuel's voice carried weight when he answered Harper's question. Something like that. He was very brave. The attorney connected the USB drive to a laptop he'd brought specifically for this purpose. The screen filled with Hank's face, exactly as Cole remembered him, but somehow younger than the man who died 3 weeks ago. White hair combed back neatly, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Sitting in the farmhouse kitchen with afternoon light coming through the window behind him. The video was dated March 15th, 2 weeks before his death. Hank's voice came through the laptop speakers. I, James Henry Bennett, 84 years old, am of sound mind making these decisions freely without pressure from anyone. This recording is to accompany my last will and testament and to provide context that the legal documents cannot contain. For the next 45 minutes, Hank walked through every provision of his will with perfect clarity. No confusion, no hesitation. Every detail explained with the precision of a man who knew this recording would be challenged in court. Samuel had prepared him well. But it was what Hank said near the end that made Cole lean forward and Harper grab his hand tightly. Cole, if you're watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain in person, and I'm sorry for that. I chose you as sole heir because you're the only one who understood what this land means. You worked it, you bled for it, you came back summer after summer when no one asked you to because something in you recognized that this dirt isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's labor. It's everything our family built and everything that will outlast us. Hank paused, looking directly into the camera as if he could see through time to this moment. To Cole sitting in a basement, watching this message from beyond the grave. There's something you need to know. In '94, I was a witness for the FBI against a land development syndicate operating in Colorado. They were using fraud, intimidation, and violence to force farmers off their land for commercial development. 23 farms targeted in 3 years. 18 families lost everything they'd built. Cole felt the pieces beginning to connect. The newspaper articles he'd read last night, the trial, the convictions. They came after me too, Hank continued. Threats, equipment sabotage, poisoned 3 head of cattle. But I had something they didn't expect. I had records, documentation, and I had a conscience that wouldn't let me stay silent while other families suffered what I'd survived. I wore a wire for the FBI for 6 months, recorded conversations, gathered evidence. When the trial came, I testified. 3 men went to federal prison based largely on my testimony. Richard Caldwell got 15 years. Thomas Voss got 12. Gerald Morse got 10. The syndicate collapsed. I entered witness protection for 2 years until the FBI confirmed the organization was disbanded and the threat was neutralized. Hank leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping lower. I returned to the farm in 1996, thought it was over. But 3 years ago, Victoria Crane made her first offer to buy this land. 47 letters over 3 years, each one rejected. But then I started noticing patterns, the same tactics from 1994, equipment failures that couldn't be explained, permit problems that appeared from nowhere, pressure on neighbors who supported me. I did research. Victoria Crane works for Crestview Development Corporation. The CEO is Richard Caldwell. The same man I put in prison 30 years ago. He's back, using different corporate structures, legal methods, but it's the same operation. Same goals, same ruthlessness. Cole felt Harper's hand tighten in his. On the screen, Hank's expression hardened. I've kept records of every contact over the past 3 years. Documentation matters. Truth doesn't always win, but it deserves a fighting chance. If Victoria threatens you directly, if she crosses certain lines, open the red notebook. Dutch Warren knows what to do with what's inside. He's been waiting for my signal. Consider this it. Hank straightened in his chair, and for a moment he looked less like an old man recording his will and more like the young farmer who'd stood in a witness box 30 years ago and refused to be intimidated. Cole, I know what you're thinking, that you're not strong enough, that you've already failed at marriage, at work, at being the man you thought you'd become. But strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up. It's about protecting what matters even when you're scared. The words hit Cole like physical blows. Hank had known about the divorce, known about the layoff, known about every private failure Cole had tried to hide from everyone, including himself. The weight doesn't get lighter, Hank said, his voice carrying the wisdom of 84 years lived with purpose. You get stronger. And son, I'm proud of you. I always was. The video ended. The room fell silent except for the laptop's cooling fan. Cole sat staring at the frozen image of his grandfather, unable to process everything he'd just learned. 30 years of secrets, a past life he'd never known existed, and now a battle he was inheriting whether he wanted it or not. Harper's small voice broke the silence. Great-grandpa believed in you, Daddy. Samuel handed Cole the sealed envelope. He asked me to give you this separately. Cole's hands shook as he opened it. Inside, Hank's handwriting filled a single page. The paper was good quality, heavy stock, the kind used for important documents. The ink was blue, the letters formed with the careful precision of someone who wanted every word to be legible, to last. Cole read it once, then again, then a third time because some truths required repetition to believe. Cole, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're probably scared. That's okay. I was scared too when my father left me this land. 900 acres felt like a weight I couldn't carry. But I learned something over 56 years of carrying it. The weight doesn't get lighter. You get stronger. They'll tell you that selling is the smart choice. They'll offer you numbers that sound like freedom. But freedom built on betrayal is just another kind of prison. This land isn't mine to sell. It never was. It belongs to the ones who come after. The ones who understand that some things can't be measured in dollars. I chose you because you're that person. Don't let them take what I'm trusting you to protect. And when it gets hard, remember that I'm proud of you. I always was. One more thing. If Victoria threatens you directly, if she crosses certain lines, open the red notebook. Dutch knows what to do with what's inside. Love, Grandpa Hank. P.S. The key to the notebook is in the barn. Inside the 1985 John Deere Combine. Driver's seat, taped under the cushion. Same place I hid your birthday money when you were 12. Cole looked up from the letter to find Samuel watching him carefully. Your grandfather was a remarkable man, brave in ways most people never have to be, and he believed you inherited that bravery. Harper tugged at Cole's sleeve. Can we go see the farm now? The drive from the bank to the farmhouse took 40 minutes on county roads that cut straight lines through wheat fields stretching toward mountains. October had turned the landscape golden. The harvest would be coming soon, if anyone was there to bring it in. Cole watched the scenery pass and felt the weight of inheritance settling onto his shoulders like a physical thing. The farmhouse appeared at the end of a gravel road, white paint weathered to gray over decades of Colorado wind. The wraparound porch sagged at the corners where boards had rotted through, dark holes visible even from the driveway. Two rocking chairs sat covered in moss and neglect, one missing a runner entirely. Harper pressed her face to the car window. It's like a haunted house, but a good haunted house. Cole parked beside the barn. The smell hit them when he opened the car door. Old wood, diesel fuel from the machinery inside the barn, earth from 900 acres stretching beyond sight in three directions. It was the smell of his childhood summers, the smell of 4:30 mornings helping Hank with breakfast before heading out to the fields. The smell of everything he'd thought he'd left behind when he moved to Denver to become someone his father would have been proud of. The front door opened with a groan that suggested decades of disuse. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, visible in the slanted morning light coming through windows so dirty they barely qualified as transparent. The kitchen table where Hank used to eat breakfast sat in the same spot it had always occupied, now covered in mail that looked at least 6 months old. Harper moved through the rooms with the fearless curiosity of children who hadn't yet learned that some discoveries carried weight. She found the John Deere calendar on the kitchen wall, still turned to March. The month Hank had died. All the things he'd meant to do and never finished, frozen in time at the moment the heart simply stopped trying. "Daddy, look!" Great-grandpa had plans he didn't finish. Cole's throat tightened looking at it. Appointments written in pencil. Equipment maintenance scheduled. The mundane details of a life interrupted. He showed Harper the barn, the 1985 John Deere combine sitting inside like a monument to summer labor. Hank had maintained it meticulously despite its age. The machine looked ready to run if someone would just turn the key. "You drove this when you were just a kid?" Cole remembered that summer when he was 12. Hank had broken his arm falling from a ladder while repairing the barn roof. The harvest was coming and couldn't wait. So Hank had taught Cole to drive the combine, patient through all the mistakes and false starts, riding in the passenger seat with his arm in a sling, while a terrified 12-year-old learned what responsibility actually meant. "I was scared," Cole told Harper, "but sometimes you have to do hard things anyway." The memory came back with sensory detail. The vibration of the engine through the steering wheel, the smell of wheat chaff and diesel, the weight of knowing that if he failed, a year's crop would be lost. And Hank beside him saying the same thing he'd said in that video. "The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger." Harper touched the controls with reverent fingers. "Are you scared now?" Cole looked at his daughter, at the barn, at the farmhouse visible through the open door. 900 acres of land he didn't know how to farm, a debt he couldn't pay, a custody battle he would probably lose, and a woman named Victoria Crane who had 3 years of practice destroying people who stood in her way. "Yeah, baby, I am." Harper took his hand in both of hers. "Then we'll do hard things anyway, together." They returned to the house and Cole started assessing what needed repair. The damage was extensive, 8 windows broken or cracked beyond salvaging. Porch joists rotted to the point of structural failure. Roof leaking in at least 3 places based on the water stains visible on ceilings. Kitchen plumbing shot, the pipes corroded through decades of hard water and minimal maintenance. The barn door hung off one hinge, swaying in the October wind. Cole was calculating repair costs in his head when Harper's voice echoed down from upstairs. "Daddy, there's a box under the desk." He found her kneeling on the floor of what had been Hank's study. A wooden box lay open in front of her, letters spread out across the worn carpet. 47 envelopes, each bearing the Ridgewood Estates Development Association logo. Each one opened, each one marked with the same word in red ink across the front. Hank's handwriting unmistakable, even from across the room. "Rejected." Harper was sounding out the words slowly, her 4th grade reading skills working through the syllables. "What does rejected mean?" "It means great-grandpa said no." "But they kept asking?" "Yeah, baby, they kept asking." Harper's 9-year-old wisdom arrived with the simple clarity of someone who'd been taught manners and assumed the rest of the world had too. That's not nice. When someone says no, you should stop. The offers escalated steadily across the envelopes. 18 million, 32 million, 41 million. With each rejection, the letters grew more insistent. The later ones included phrases like final opportunity and alternative arrangements may become necessary. The language carefully calibrated to suggest consequences without making explicit threats that could be used in court. Harper found the envelope without red ink at the bottom of the box. The postmark dated 2 weeks before Hank's death. Inside, the offer had reached $47 million, the highest yet. But attached to the standard offer letter was a handwritten note on personal stationery, not official letterhead. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, precise. Cole read it twice, then a third time to make sure he'd understood correctly. Mr. Bennett, I want you to know that I understand families. Estates of this size rarely stay intact after the original owner passes. Children disagree. Grandchildren have different priorities. Circumstances change. I'm not suggesting anything will happen to you, only observing that time moves forward for all of us. Would it not be wiser to make arrangements now on your terms rather than leave decisions to people who may not share your attachment to this particular piece of earth? I remain available whenever you're ready to have a realistic conversation. Victoria Crane. Beneath her note, Hank had written his own response in pencil, though he'd apparently never sent it. They think money buys everything, but this land isn't mine to sell. It belongs to the ones who come after me, the ones who understand what it means. Cole will understand, Harper will learn, and neither of them will be bought. Harper pulled another document from the bottom of the box. Her mathematical mind immediately caught the important details. Daddy, what's this about? Cole took the paper from her hands. Bank notice dated November 3rd, 3 days after Hank's death. The medical debt from Hank's ICU stay in March, $185,000 that Cole had signed as guarantor because his grandfather had refused to sell land to pay hospital bills. The debt had been transferred. Previous creditor, First National Bank. New creditor, Ridgewood Holdings, LLC. Payment due in full, February 1st. Property lien authorized if default. Managing Director, Victoria Crane. Harper's voice was small but certain. Daddy, what's 90 days from November 3rd? Cole calculated in his head, February 1st. And Mommy's court thing? The custody hearing. Cole had received the notice last week, February 1st. Harper looked at him with eyes that understood more than a 9-year-old should have to. Both numbers say 90 days. The bad lady knew about the court thing with Mommy, didn't she? The realization crashed over Cole like cold water. Victoria hadn't just bought the debt opportunistically. She'd bought it strategically, timing the transfer to coincide with the custody battle. Maximum pressure at exactly the same moment, attacking him as both a father and a landowner simultaneously. Make him choose between fighting for Harper or fighting for the land. Force him to surrender one to possibly save the other. Harper studied his face with the perceptiveness children sometimes possess when adults forget to hide their fear. Daddy, are you going to give up? Cole looked at his daughter, at the farmhouse they stood in, broken but still standing, at Hank's letter still clutched in his hand, at the words written there in his grandfather's careful script. The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger. He knelt down to Harper's level and took her small hands in his. Listen to me. We are not giving up. We are going to fix this house. We are going to keep this land, and we are going to stay together. Do you believe me? I believe you, but Daddy, how? Cole stood and looked around the room, at 47 envelopes marked rejected, at a debt he couldn't pay, at a house that needed thousands in repairs, at 900 acres he didn't know how to farm, at a woman named Victoria Crane who had unlimited resources and a 30-year grudge. The same way we'd fix those windows, one piece at a time. That night, after Harper had finally fallen asleep in one of the upstairs bedrooms, they'd managed to clean enough for basic habitability. Cole sat at the kitchen table and did the math that would haunt him for the next 3 months. He took a piece of paper from Hank's desk and wrote out the numbers and columns. Savings from his TechCore severance and what remained after 8 months of unemployment, $23,000. Medical debt due, $185,000. Shortfall, $162,000. Days until custody hearing, 90. Days until debt due, 90. Days until Victoria's Crestview exclusivity window closed based on what he'd read in the legal documents, 60. 3 countdowns running simultaneously, all designed to suffocate him into surrender. Cole created a chart on the kitchen wall where he'd see it every morning. Numbers written in his careful handwriting, impossible to ignore or forget. 90 days until debt due equals lose land. 90 days until custody hearing equals lose Harper. 60 days until Victoria's deadline. Savings 23,000, debt 185,000, shortfall 162,000. He was staring at those numbers when Harper appeared in the doorway. Mr. Ears clutched under one arm, eyes heavy with interrupted sleep. Daddy, why are the numbers the same? What do you mean? Both 90 days. The bad lady knew about the court thing with Mommy, didn't she? Cole had already figured that out, but hearing Harper say it made the manipulation more real somehow, more deliberately cruel. Harper studied his face with 9-year-old wisdom that cut through complexity to essential truth. Daddy, are you going to give up? Cole looked at his daughter, at the farmhouse they'd started exploring, at Hank's letter still sitting on the kitchen table where he'd left it after reading it for the 10th time. The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger. He knelt down to Harper's level and took her small hands in his. No, Harper, we are not giving up. We are going to fix this house. We are going to keep this land, and we are going to stay together. Do you believe me? I believe you, but Daddy, how? The same way we'd fix those windows, one piece at a time. Harper threw her arms around his waist and held on tight enough that he felt it in his ribs. Outside, the October wind picked up, rattling loose boards on the porch and whistling through gaps in window frames that would need replacing before winter came. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the farmhouse, 900 acres of wheat waited for spring planting. And somewhere in an office in Denver or Grand Junction, Victoria Crane was probably working late, planning her next move in a war Cole was only beginning to understand how to fight. But for now, in this moment, he had Harper's arms around him and Hank's words in his memory and a decision made. They would not surrender. They would get stronger. One piece at a time, one day at a time, one impossible challenge at a time. The weight doesn't get lighter. You get stronger. Tomorrow they would start the real work. The morning after they decided to fight arrived with the kind of cold that made everything brittle. Cole woke at 4:30, the same time Hank used to wake, though he'd never been a morning person before. Something about sleeping in his grandfather's house had reset his internal clock to farmer hours. He lay in the darkness, listening to the old building settle and creak, wood contracting in the pre-dawn chill, and thought about the 84 years Hank had woken to these same sounds. Harper was already awake when he went downstairs. She sat at the kitchen table with Mr. Ears propped against the sugar bowl, studying the chart Cole had made last night. Her small finger traced the numbers like she was working out a math problem. 9-year-olds shouldn't have to calculate the distance between their father and financial ruin, but here she was, lips moving silently as she added and subtracted in her head. Daddy, how much does a window cost? Cole poured coffee from the pot he'd started. The machine, one of the few things in the kitchen that still worked reliably. Depends on the size. Maybe $80 for materials. More if we hire someone to install it. Harper pulled a notebook from her backpack, the kind with wide ruled lines for elementary school handwriting. She'd written the numbers from the wall chart across the top of a fresh page. Below that, she'd started a list. Windows, porch, roof, kitchen, barn door. If we do the work ourselves, we save money on the labor part, right? Cole sat down across from her, marveling at how her mind worked. She'd inherited her mother's analytical thinking, the same quality that had made Kristen a successful accountant before the divorce, the same quality that made her devastating in custody negotiations. Yeah, baby, we save on labor. Harper wrote something else in her careful 4th-grade handwriting. Before and after pictures. Proof we're making it better. She looked up at him with an expression older than 9 years had any right to be. If we take pictures of everything we fix, Mommy's lawyer can't say we're living in a dangerous place. Right? The logic was sound and heartbreaking in equal measure. Cole reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're pretty smart. You know that? I learned from great-grandpa. He kept records of everything. She said it like it was obvious, like documentation was just what responsible people did. And maybe it was. Maybe that's what separated people who survived from people who got crushed. The willingness to build evidence brick by brick, photo by photo, small victory by small victory. After breakfast, they started on the first window. Cole had found tools in the barn, Hank's collection accumulated over decades of self-sufficiency, hammers and screwdrivers, and a level that was probably older than Cole himself. Everything was coated in dust, but functional. Built to last by companies that no longer existed, back when tools were investments instead of disposable conveniences. Harper insisted on the documentation process. She used Cole's phone to photograph the broken window from 3 angles, made him hold a piece of paper with the date written in marker so there'd be no question about when the photo was taken. Then she printed the photos at the library in town on their drive back from buying lumber and supplies, spending $2 of their dwindling cash on color prints that she arranged on the kitchen wall with tape. Window number 1, she wrote below the before photo in her careful print, broken. Then she left space for the after photo they'd take when the repair was complete. The work itself was harder than Cole remembered from the one summer Hank had taught him basic carpentry. His hands had gone soft from years of keyboard work. Within an hour, he had blisters forming. Within 2 hours, the blisters had popped and his palms were raw. But Harper was watching, and he couldn't quit while those eyes were on him. Couldn't show her that hard things stayed hard even when you committed to doing them. By late afternoon, they'd removed the broken window and installed the new one. The glass was clean and clear. The frame was level. When Cole stepped back to examine their work, something tight in his chest loosened slightly. It wasn't much. 1 window, 8 more needed replacing. But it was tangible proof that broken things could be made whole. Harper took the after photo, made Cole stand beside the window so the scale was clear. Then she printed it at the library on their evening supply run, added it to the wall, and drew a decorative border around both images. Window number 1, she wrote again below the after photo. Fixed. We did it, Daddy. We did. Tomorrow we'd do another one. That night, after Harper finally fell asleep, Cole sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and continued the research he'd started the night before. If Victoria Crane and Richard Caldwell were running the same operation from 1982, there would be patterns, evidence, other victims who'd faced the same pressure. He found them within an hour. The Ridgeway Gazette archives went back 20 years online. Cole searched for property sales, foreclosures, anything involving agricultural land. The pattern emerged like a photograph developing in chemicals. 23 farms in Weld County targeted between 2019 and 2024. 18 had sold within 6 to 18 months of first contact from Ridgewood Estates Development Association. Cole created a spreadsheet tracking each case. Owner names, acreage, purchase price, time from first offer to sale. Common threads connected them all. Equipment failures that insurance didn't cover. Sudden permit issues with county regulators. Family members who pushed for sale. Financial pressure that appeared from nowhere and escalated until resistance became impossible. One case stood out. Thomas Fletcher, no relation to the county commissioner, had held out for 2 years, refused 5 offers, each one larger than the last. Then his barn burned down. Electrical fire, the insurance investigator concluded, though Fletcher swore he'd had the wiring inspected 2 months prior. Cost of rebuilding exceeded his coverage by $60,000. He sold 3 weeks later. Another case, Patricia Mendez, owner of 400 acres west of Ridgeway. She'd refused Victoria's offers for 18 months. Then the county hit her with a zoning violation, claimed she was running a commercial operation without proper permits because she sold vegetables at a farmer's market. Legal fees to fight the citation cost her $35,000. She sold to avoid bankruptcy. The tactics were sophisticated enough to maintain plausible deniability. Nothing could be proven in court, but the pattern was unmistakable to anyone who looked. Cole was deep in property records when headlights swept across the kitchen window. A vehicle had turned into the long driveway, approaching slowly. He checked the time, 11:15 at night. Nobody visited farmhouses at this hour unless they had specific reason. He moved to the window and watched a weathered Chevy pickup truck come to a stop beside the barn. The driver's door opened and a man climbed out, moving with the economy of motion that suggested military training. Even in the darkness, Cole could see the rigid posture, the alert awareness of surroundings, the way he scanned the property before approaching the house. Cole met him at the front door before he could knock. Didn't want Harper waking up to strangers arriving in the night. The man was maybe 65, gray crew cut, wearing work clothes that had seen better days but were clean and cared for. His handshake was firm, calloused palm rough against Cole's softer grip. Cole Bennett, that's me, Dutch Warren. I own the section north of here. Your grandfather and I were neighbors for 42 years. The name triggered memory. Hank had mentioned Dutch in his letter. Dutch knows what to do with what's inside. He'd been waiting for Hank's signal. Dutch glanced at the house, taking in the broken windows and sagging porch with an assessing eye. Saw your lights on. Figured you couldn't sleep either. Mind if I come in? They sat at the kitchen table with coffee Cole reheated on the stove. Dutch's eyes went immediately to the chart on the wall, the countdown numbers, the financial calculations that told the story of mounting desperation. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed, like he'd been waiting to see whether Cole understood the stakes. Your grandfather called me 2 weeks before he died, Dutch said. Asked me to watch things. Said if anything happened to him, I should help you if you decided to fight. His voice carried the flat affect of someone who'd spent years in the situations where emotional display was liability instead of asset. Did he tell you about 1994? Some of it. I knew he'd testified against some developers. Knew he'd been in witness protection for a while, but he kept most of it private. Man had his reasons. Dutch wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, steam rising in the cold kitchen. I served with your father in Gulf War, David Bennett. Good man. Died saving his unit in 1991 when their convoy hit an IED. He made me promise if anything happened to him, I'd look after his family. The information hit Cole like a punch. His father had died when Cole was 1 year old. He had no memories of the man, only photographs and stories Hank used to tell. But hearing it from someone who'd been there, who'd witnessed the death firsthand, made it suddenly real in a way it never had been. Your grandfather wouldn't let me help financially, Dutch continued. Too proud. But he accepted my labor, so I'm here to teach you what he taught me. Cole looked at this frame. The stranger who apparently carried a 30-year-old promise like a debt that could never be fully repaid. Teach me what? How to fix what's broken, how to document what matters, and how to fight people who think money and power make them untouchable. Dutch pulled a folder from inside his jacket. Inside were photographs, printed on regular paper, but clear enough to see details. Victoria Crane meeting with County Commissioner Robert Fletcher at a restaurant in Fort Collins. 2 photos showed them at a corner booth, engaged in intense conversation. A third showed Fletcher accepting an envelope that was too thick to contain anything but cash. I've been watching Victoria for 2 years, Dutch said, since your grandfather asked me to keep an eye on things. She's got 3 commissioners in her pocket, Fletcher, Daniel Holt, and Patricia Dawson. All 3 received significant campaign contributions from Crestview Development. Legal, technically, but the amounts raise questions. He spread more photos across the table. Victoria meeting with Marcus Bennett at a coffee shop in Denver. The timestamps showed 6 different meetings over 4 months, all while Hank was still alive. In 2 of the photos, Marcus was accepting what looked like paperwork. In another, he was putting something into his jacket pocket that could have been anything, but probably wasn't anything good. Your uncles have been taking money from her for 6 months, Dutch said. Consulting fees according to the tax documents I managed to access. But Marcus doesn't have a consulting business. Never has. Cole stared at the evidence of his uncle's betrayal. Part of him had suspected, but seeing it documented made the anger rise hot and immediate. Can we use this? In court, maybe. But Victoria's not planning to fight you in court anymore. She's going political. County board hearing on the rezoning proposal. That's where she'll make her move. Dutch gathered the photos back into the folder and handed it to Cole. Your grandfather kept records for 3 years. Everything's in that red notebook. But evidence doesn't win battles by itself. You need people willing to stand with you. Farmers who remember what Hank did for them. Neighbors who know what Victoria's capable of. He stood to leave, draining the last of his coffee. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. Bring your daughter if she's awake. We've got a lot of work to do and not much time to do it. At the door, he paused and looked back. Your grandfather was one of the good ones. Saved my farm in 2004 when a different developer tried the same tactics Victoria's using. Taught me how to fight smart instead of angry. Now I'm paying that debt forward. After Dutch left, Cole sat in the darkness thinking about debts and promises and the weight of expectations. Hank had saved Dutch's farm. Dutch had promised Cole's father to watch over his family. Hank had chosen Cole to inherit 900 acres in a war. And now all of it pressed down on him like physical weight, asking if he had the strength to carry what others had carried before him. The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger. But what if you weren't strong enough to begin with? Dutch Warren arrived at 6 o'clock the next morning as promised, his truck loaded with tools and lumber. Harper was already awake, dressed in Hank's oversized work shirt and ready to help. She'd made coffee and toast for all of them, setting out plates at the kitchen table like she was the lady of the house. Dutch smiled at her, the first real expression Cole had seen on the man's face. "You must be Harper. Your great-grandpa talked about you all the time. Said you were smart as a whip and twice as tough." Harper beamed under the praise. "He taught me fractions by measuring boards, and how engines mix air and fuel. And that documentation matters." Dutch nodded seriously, treating her like an equal rather than a child. "Then you're already ahead of most people. Come on, let's see what we're working with." The porch rebuild became their first major project. The foundation joists had rotted through years of water damage, creating a structural failure that made the entire porch unsafe. Dutch showed them how to jack up the sagging sections, remove the damaged wood, and install new pressure-treated lumber that would last another 20 years. He taught through demonstration rather than lecture, showed them how to pre-drill holes so wood didn't split, how to use a level properly, watching the bubble settle exactly in the center, how to measure twice and cut once because lumber costs money and mistakes cost more. Harper absorbed everything with intense focus. She asked questions constantly, her 9-year-old curiosity unfiltered by adult self-consciousness. "Why do we put the boards this way? Why does this angle matter? Why can't we skip this step?" Dutch answered each question with patience that suggested he'd taught people before, maybe in the military, maybe in other contexts where skill transfer was measured in lives saved rather than grades earned. "Because your great-grandpa taught me this way," he'd say. "And before that, his father taught him. And now I'm teaching you. That's how knowledge survives, hand to hand, generation to generation." By the end of the first day, they'd replace 4 joists and reinforce the porch foundation. The work was hard. Cole's hands, already raw from window repairs, developed new blisters on top of old ones. His back ached from bending and lifting. But when they stepped back to examine what they'd accomplished, the visible progress was undeniable. The porch no longer sagged. The boards no longer creaked under weight. Something broken had become something functional. Harper insisted on the documentation ritual. Photos from 3 angles, before and after, date written clearly on paper held in frame. She added them to the growing gallery on the kitchen wall, her labels becoming more elaborate with each edition. "Porch foundation," she wrote, "holes you could fall through to strong enough for anything." The exclamation point was larger than the other letters, enthusiasm bleeding through in the extra pressure she'd applied to the marker. That night, Dutch stayed for dinner, which was spaghetti from a box and sauce from a jar, because Cole's cooking skills hadn't improved since the divorce. They ate at Hank's table, the 3 of them, and for the first time since arriving at the farmhouse, Cole felt something other than overwhelming dread. Not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of hope. The sense that winning wasn't completely impossible if you worked hard enough and smart enough and had help from people who knew what they were doing. After Harper went to bed, Dutch pulled out another folder. Your grandfather wasn't just keeping records on Victoria. He was investigating the whole operation, tracking money, following corporate structures, documenting connections. He spread papers across the table, financial documents, corporate filings, property records. Hank had traced Crestview Development's ownership through 7 layers of shell companies. At the bottom of it all were 3 names: Richard Caldwell as CEO, Gerald Morse, released from federal prison in 2006, now serving as CFO, and Victoria Crane as VP of Acquisitions, recruited in 2019. Same people who went to prison in 1994, Dutch said. Same tactics, just different corporate names and better lawyers. He showed Cole more documentation, a list of 23 farms targeted since 2019. 18 of them sold after systematic pressure. 5 still fighting, including Hank's estate. Cross-referenced with each farm's history were notes about incidents: equipment failures, permit problems, family pressure. The patterns were unmistakable once you knew to look for them. "This is enough to stop them," Cole said, hope rising in his chest. "We can take this to the FBI, the state attorney general, somebody." Dutch's expression didn't change. Evidence matters in a courtroom. But Victoria's not going to let this reach a courtroom. She's filed for an emergency county board hearing on rezoning. That's a political process, not a legal one. Facts compete with economics, job projections, tax revenue forecasts. Truth is just one factor among many. He gathered the papers back into order. "But this gives us ammunition. Shows pattern and practice. Proves she's done this before. We just need to figure out how to present it to people who can actually make a difference." Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Wake at 4:30, coffee and breakfast, Work until dark. Windows replaced one by one. Porch completely rebuilt. Roof patched where leaks had damaged the attic. Kitchen plumbing torn out and reinstalled with pipes that didn't corrode if you looked at them wrong. Harper documented everything. Her before and after wall grew until it covered most of the kitchen. Each repair was photographed, labeled, dated. Visual proof that they were building something, that their labor produced measurable results, that broken things could be made whole through effort and patience. Dutch taught them skills Hank had never gotten around to passing down. How to wire an electrical outlet without burning the house down. How to patch drywall so the repair was invisible. How to read the grain in wood to predict where it would split under stress. And in the evenings, after Harper was asleep, Dutch and Cole continued the investigation. They built a database of every farm Victoria had targeted, interviewed 5 of the former owners by phone, getting their stories, documenting the tactics used against them, built a timeline showing how pressure escalated, what triggers prompted sales, which county officials were involved in permit problems and zoning challenges. The pattern became clearer with each new data point. Victoria would make contact with a polite offer. When refused, she'd wait 2 months and come back with a higher number. After the third refusal, incidents would begin, equipment failures, usually. Something expensive but not catastrophic. Then permit issues, county inspectors finding violations that had never mattered before. Finally, family pressure. Relatives suddenly concerned about estate planning, inheritance taxes, the wisdom of holding illiquid assets in an uncertain economy. If the farmer still refused, Victoria would escalate, buy up adjacent land, and make it difficult to access fields, file nuisance complaints about farm operations. In extreme cases, things would happen that couldn't be traced back but were too convenient to be coincidental. Barns burned, cattle got sick, wells tested positive for contamination. Always, the pressure built slowly enough that each individual incident could be explained away. But taken together, the pattern revealed systematic harassment designed to make resistance unsustainable. "Your grandfather figured all this out," Dutch said one night as they reviewed the database. "Spent 3 years documenting it. He knew he couldn't stop them alone. But he could create a record, leave evidence for whoever came after him." Cole looked at the red notebook sitting on the table between them. Hank's documentation, 3 years of meticulous record-keeping, waiting to be opened. The key was supposedly in the barn, taped under the driver's seat cushion in the old John Deere combine. Same place Hank used to hide birthday money when Cole was 12. "Tomorrow," Cole said. "Tomorrow we open it." But tomorrow came with complications. Marcus and Caroline arrived at 7 in the evening without warning or invitation. They let themselves in through the front door like they had a right to be there, walking into the house Cole and Harper had spent 2 weeks transforming from abandoned ruin to functional dwelling. Marcus stopped in his kitchen doorway and stared at the before and after wall. 20 photos documenting repairs. Windows, porch, roof, plumbing. Each one labeled in Harper's careful handwriting. Each one proving that Cole was making the property better, not worse. "Jesus, Cole, you're really going through with this." Caroline wrinkled her nose at the smell of fresh sawdust and paint. She wore heels inappropriate for a farmhouse, and a dress that probably cost more than Cole's monthly rent back in Denver. "We need to talk about the land," Marcus said. "I know Dad left everything to you, but that doesn't seem fair. 900 acres worth $40 million. You're going to keep it all while your family struggles?" Cole set down the hammer he'd been using to repair the pantry door. Spoke with the controlled calm of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation in his head 100 times. "You haven't visited Grandpa in 12 years, Uncle Marcus. You didn't call him on his birthday. Didn't come when he had pneumonia in 2019. And now you want to talk about fairness?" Marcus's face flushed red. "That's not the point. The point is we're family. We should share in this." Harper appeared from the living room where she'd been reading. She wore Hank's work shirt and had sawdust in her hair from helping with the porch repair earlier. She looked at Marcus and Caroline with the direct gaze children use before they learn that some truths shouldn't be spoken aloud. "We're fixing Great-Grandpa's house. We're working really hard." Caroline's smile was patronizing in a way that made Cole's hands curl into fists. "Sweetie, wouldn't you rather live with your mommy in her nice clean house? You could have your own room, not sleep in a construction site." Harper's response came fierce and immediate. "I want to stay with Daddy and finish fixing Great-Grandpa's house." Caroline ignored her and addressed Cole directly. "Victoria explained the situation to us. The land is worth more developed than sitting here growing wheat. 47 million split three ways. That's 15.6 million each. You could pay off your debts, buy a house in Denver, give Harper a real childhood. She pulled out her phone and showed Cole the calculator app, the math already done, as if seeing the numbers would make him realize his resistance was foolish. Cole stepped closer, spoke quietly enough that Harper wouldn't hear the fury in his voice. Get out. Marcus tried one more time. Cole, don't be stupid. Victoria has resources, relationships with county officials. If you don't cooperate, this process gets very complicated. And don't think Kristen's lawyer won't hear about this. Living in a broken-down farmhouse, no income, dragging your daughter into manual labor. The last word was deliberate provocation. Cole recognized the tactic, make him angry, make him do something that could be used against him in court. He kept his voice level through an act of will. Dragging her? She's learning what it means to work for something, to build something that matters. When's the last time you built anything, Marcus? Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Cole watched his uncle process the question and find no good answer. Marcus Bennett had spent his life in middle management positions, pushing paper, attending meetings, collecting paychecks. He'd never built anything with his hands, never created something tangible that would outlast him. Caroline grabbed Marcus's arm. Let's go, he's made his choice. They left without saying goodbye. Through the window, Cole watched their rental SUV disappear down the gravel road, dust rising in their wake. Harper stood beside him, small hand finding his. Why did Uncle Marcus say those mean things? Because he's scared, baby. And scared people sometimes hurt the people they love. Are you scared? Yeah, I am. Harper squeezed his hand tighter. Then we'll be scared together, but we won't give up. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He lay in Hank's old bedroom, staring at ceiling cracks and thinking about Marcus's visit. The timing was too convenient. Victoria had sent them, used them as messengers to deliver a final offer dressed up as family concern. At midnight, his laptop chimed with an email notification. He opened it expecting spam, but found something worse. The email was from Kristen's attorney. Subject line, modification of custody arrangement. The body text was cold legal language that translated to simple truth. They were filing for full custody based on unsafe living conditions, financial instability, an inappropriate environment for a minor child. Hearing scheduled February 1st. 3 months away. 90 days to prove he could provide stable housing and income or lose Harper permanently. Before Cole could process the implications, a second email arrived. This one from First National Bank. The medical debt had been officially transferred to Ridgewood Holdings, LLC. $185,000 now owed to Victoria Crane, with payment due in full on February 1st. Property lien authorized if default occurred. Both deadlines on the same date. Both designed to force an impossible choice. Fight for the land or fight for Harper. Not enough time or money to do both. Cole stared at the screen until the words blurred. Did the math one more time, hoping it would come out different. Savings after 2 weeks of supplies and materials, $19,000. Debt due, $185,000. Shortfall, $166,000. Days until custody hearing, 90. Days until debt due, 90. Days until Victoria's Crestview deadline based on the documents Dutch had found, 60. His phone rang. Unknown number. He knew who it was before he answered. Victoria Crane's voice came through calm and professional. Mr. Bennett, I hope I'm not calling too late. What do you want? I want to help you. I've just filed a motion with Weld County Board requesting emergency public hearing on rezoning proposal. The board agreed to expedite. Hearing is scheduled December 3rd, 10 days from now. Cole felt the trap closing. You're claiming what? That the Bennett property is being deliberately neglected, causing economic harm to surrounding community, which isn't entirely inaccurate. The land hasn't been properly farmed in 2 years. Equipment is deteriorating. Property values of adjacent parcels are being negatively impacted. That's a lie. It's economics. And the county board will have to weigh those economics against your personal attachment to land you don't even know how to farm. Victoria's voice dropped, became almost gentle. Cole, may I call you Cole? You seem like a good father. I'm a mother too. I understand what it means to fight for your child. But fighting costs money, time, energy, and you're about to fight 3 battles simultaneously. Rezoning hearing in 10 days. Debt payment in 90. Custody hearing in 90. You cannot win all 3. Probably can't win even 1. Is that a threat? It's mathematics. 47 million solves all your problems. Pays your debt. Buys a house. Proves to Kristen's lawyer, Schreier, you can provide stability, or you can fight me and lose your daughter, your inheritance, and your dignity. She paused for effect. Think about it. You have 72 hours before my offer expires. After that, we proceed with the county hearing and let the political process take its course. She hung up before he could respond. Cole sat in the darkness, staring at the chart on the kitchen wall, 3 countdowns running simultaneously, all designed to suffocate him into surrender, make him choose between impossible options, guarantee failure no matter which path he took. Harper appeared in the doorway, Mr. Ears under one arm, eyes heavy with interrupted sleep. "Daddy, what did the bad lady say?" Cole considered lying but decided on truth. She'd hear it eventually anyway. She said, "We can't win." Harper walked over and studied the chart, looked at the numbers with her 9-year-old mathematical mind. "But Daddy, we already won 20 times. Cole was confused. "What?" Harper pointed at the before and after wall. 20 photos, 20 repairs completed. 20 times we did something hard. 20 times we won. If we can win 20 times, we can win 90 times. She crawled into his lap, already too big for it, but still small enough that he could hold her. Great-grandpa said the weight doesn't get lighter. You get stronger. So we'll just get stronger 90 times. Cole held his daughter and felt something shift inside him. She was right. They'd already proven they could do hard things, could fix broken windows and rebuild porches and make progress one small victory at a time. The distance from here to there was just 90 more victories. 90 more days of getting stronger. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow we open the red notebook and find out what Grandpa left us to fight with." Harper yawned and nodded against his chest. "Tomorrow we get stronger again." The next morning, Cole and Harper walked out to the barn together in dawn light that turned everything golden. The 1985 John Deere combine sat waiting, patient as a monument. Cole climbed into the cab and lifted the driver's seat cushion. Taped to the underside, exactly where Hank had said it would be, was a small brass key. The same hiding place Hank had used for birthday money when Cole was 12. $50 each year, always with a note for the hard worker. The tradition had continued through Cole's teenage years and only stopped when he went away to college and stopped coming back for summers. Cole peeled the key free and held it up to the morning light. It was warm from where his hand had touched it, as if the metal remembered Hank's fingers, remembered being placed there with intention and care. Back in the kitchen, Cole opened the red notebook for the first time. The lock clicked and the cover fell open to reveal 150 pages of Hank's meticulous handwriting. 3 years of documentation organized by date and category. The first section detailed every contact with Victoria Crane. Dates, times, method of communication. Each letter she'd sent was summarized. Each phone call logged with notes about what was said and what threats were implied. 47 contacts over 3 years, each one marked with Hank's assessment. Rejected, manipulation attempt, veiled threat. The second section documented incidents on the property. March 2022, irrigation pump failed, new sabotage suspected. June 2022, county inspector visited unannounced claiming anonymous complaint about pesticide storage. September 2022, surveyor observed on property without permission. License plate recorded. The third section was what Dutch had been waiting to see. Financial documentation tracing money from Crestview Development through shell companies to various recipients. Marcus Bennett had received $150,000 over 6 months, all labeled as consulting fees for a company that didn't exist. County Commissioner Robert Fletcher had received $47,000 in campaign contributions, plus another $20,000 that went to a PAC he controlled. 2 other commissioners showed similar patterns. But the final section was the most damaging. Hank had traced Crestview's corporate structure back to its origins. 7 shell companies layered one on top of another. At the bottom were 3 names with criminal histories. Richard Caldwell, released from federal prison in 2009, Gerald Morse, released in 2006, and a third name that made Cole's breath catch. Thomas Voss Jr., son of Thomas Voss, who died in prison in 2003, now serving as Crestview's corporate counsel. The same operation, the same people or their descendants, 30 years later and still using the same playbook. Dutch arrived as Cole finished reading the last page, took one look at the notebook and nodded slowly. "Your grandfather spent 3 years building this case. Everything you need to prove pattern and practice. Everything you need to show the county board that approving Victoria's rezoning request means rewarding systematic criminal harassment." He pulled out his own folder, added it to the materials on the table, And I've got surveillance photos showing Victoria meeting with commissioners, Marcus taking payments, evidence of coordination between people who claim they're operating independently. Cole looked at the mountain of evidence and felt hope struggling against despair. Is it enough? To win in court? Maybe. To win in a county board hearing where 3 commissioners are already bought and paid for? Dutch shrugged. That's the real fight. Politics versus truth. We'll find out which one matters more. He checked his watch. 10 days until the hearing. We need to do 3 things. First, finish making this house livable so Kristen's lawyer can't claim unsafe conditions. Second, build a coalition of farmers willing to testify about what Victoria's done. Third, figure out how to present 3 years of evidence in a 3-minute testimony window. Cole felt the weight of it all pressing down again. How do we do all that in 10 days? Dutch smiled for the second time since Cole had met him. Same way we fixed 20 windows and rebuilt a porch. One piece at a time, one day at a time, one small victory at a time. Harper appeared in the doorway with her camera and her notebook. Are we taking before pictures today? Dutch looked at her seriously. Today we're taking before pictures of everything. Because we're about to build something bigger than windows and porches. We're about to build an army. That afternoon they started making calls. Dutch had a list of every farmer Hank had helped over 40 years. 27 names, some of them going back to the 1980s. People who remembered what it meant when Hank Bennett showed up with his attorney and his records and his refusal to let bad people win. Cole talked to them one by one, explained the situation, asked if they'd be willing to attend the county hearing, maybe testify if given the chance. Some said yes immediately, remembering debts that could never be fully repaid. Others hesitated, worried about making enemies of people with power and money and long memories. By evening, they had commitments from 15 farmers. Enough for a presence, enough to show the county board that this wasn't just one stubborn man refusing to accept reality. This was a community standing up for principles that mattered more than profit. But 15 farmers against Victoria's resources and Commissioner Fletcher's political machine still felt like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Dutch seemed unconcerned. Your grandfather beat them with less. In 994, he stood in a courtroom alone and told the truth. No lawyers, no coalition, just documentation and the refusal to be intimidated. He won then. We can win now. That night, Harper added 3 new photos to the kitchen wall. Not before and after pictures this time. Before pictures of what came next. The kitchen table covered in evidence. Dutch and Cole working side by side. And a close-up of the red notebook open to the first page where Hank had written a single sentence. The truth doesn't always win, but it deserves a fighting chance. Harper labeled the photos with her usual care, getting ready to fight. Then she drew stars around the borders, decorative touches that made something frightening feel less overwhelming. Cole looked at his daughter, at Dutch reviewing surveillance photos, at the wall covered in proof that broken things could be fixed, and made a decision. They would take Hank's evidence and Dutch's surveillance and 15 farmers' testimony and go into that county hearing with everything they had. Not because winning was guaranteed, but because some fights mattered too much to walk away from, regardless of odds. Because Harper was watching and learning what it meant to stand up when standing up was hard. Because Hank had spent 56 years proving that land wasn't just real estate and legacy wasn't just inheritance. The weight doesn't get lighter. You get stronger. 10 days until the hearing. 90 days until 2 deadlines designed to destroy him. But for now, for tonight, they had evidence and allies and each other. Tomorrow, they'd get stronger again. Dawn arrived on December 3rd with the kind of clarity that made everything sharp-edged and unforgiving. Cole woke at 4 and knew he wouldn't sleep again. He lay in the darkness listening to Harper's breathing from the room next door, steady and peaceful. The sound of someone who still believed that courage and truth were enough to win battles against people with unlimited resources. He wanted to believe it too. Wanted to think that 3 years of documentation and Ruth's recording and Dutch's surveillance photos would matter more than Victoria's money and political connections. But wanting something didn't make it true. And Cole had learned enough about the world to know that justice often lost to convenience when powerful people had reasons to look the other way. The farmhouse was cold. November had given way to December, and the old heating system struggled against Colorado winter. Cole started coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun come up over 900 acres of land that might not be his by sunset. The wheat fields stretched golden toward mountains that stood indifferent to human concerns about ownership and legacy. Harper appeared at 5:30, already dressed in the navy dress she'd worn to Hank's funeral. She'd washed it herself last night, hung it to dry with the careful attention she brought to everything that mattered. Around her shoulders, she wore Hank's work shirt like armor, the fabric soft from decades of washing, the sleeves rolled up 6 times. "You ready?" Cole asked. Harper nodded seriously and handed him a folder. Inside were printed copies of every photograph from the before and after wall, 60 images arranged in chronological order, with her handwritten labels preserved. At the bottom, she'd added one more photo taken yesterday at sunset. Cole and Harper standing in front of the farmhouse, the repaired porch visible behind them, both of them covered in sawdust and paint, but smiling. The label read, "The People Who Never Gave Up." Cole felt his throat tighten looking at it. "When did you make this?" "Last night after you went to bed. I thought maybe you could show the commissioners. Prove we're making the house better." He pulled his daughter close. "You're pretty smart, you know that? I learned from great-grandpa. And from you." They ate breakfast in silence, both of them too nervous for conversation. The kitchen felt different this morning. Not quite hostile, but weighted with expectation, as if the walls themselves understood that today would determine whether all their labor had meaning or was just expensive delay of inevitable defeat. Dutch arrived at 6 with coffee from the diner and grim determination written across his face. He'd been up all night reviewing documents, making sure every piece of evidence was organized and accessible. The red notebook sat on the table between them, 3 years of Hank's meticulous documentation condensed into 150 pages that told the story of systematic harassment disguised as business negotiation. 15 farmers will meet us at the county building at 8, Dutch said. Tom Fletcher will speak if we get extra testimony slots. Ruth has the Patterson recording queued on 3 different devices in case technical problems arise. Samuel Price will be there representing Hank's estate officialcy. Everything we can control is controlled. And what we can't control? Dutch looked at Cole with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who'd survived too many battles to believe in guaranteed victories. 3 commissioners are already bought. Fletcher, Holt, and Dawson took significant money from Crestview. They'll vote either rezoning no matter what evidence we present. Commissioner Whitmore is fair-minded but cautious. He'll want ironclad proof before voting against economic development. Commissioner Brennan is our best chance. Former small business owner, hates corruption, respects documentation. If we convince her and Whitmore, we win. If we lose either one, it's over. The mathematics were brutal. 3 votes certain for Victoria, 2 votes uncertain, 0 margin for error. They drove to Weld County Administration Building in Cole's truck with Harper between them on the bench seat. The 40-minute drive passed in silence, broken only by the sound of tires on asphalt and Harper's occasional questions about procedure. What happens if they vote yes? What happens if they vote no? What happens if it's tied? Cole answered each question honestly because lying to her now would be worse than whatever truth they'd face later. If they vote yes, we appeal to state level. If they vote no, we keep the land. Ties are resolved by chairman's vote, which means Victoria wins. Harper processed this information with her 9-year-old logic. So we have to win completely. No ties, no close calls. Yeah, baby, we have to win completely. The parking lot was already filling when they arrived at 8:30. Victoria had brought her army. 30 people in matching Crestview Development polo shirts stood near the entrance, holding professionally printed signs. Jobs, not farms. Progress over nostalgia. Support local families. The signs were focus grouped and market tested, designed to make Cole look like the villain in a story about economic opportunity. But on the opposite side of the entrance stood 15 farmers in work clothes. No matching shirts, no professional signs. Just handmade placards with messages written in marker. Protect family farms. Land legacy matters. Hank Bennett kept faith. They looked weathered and tired and real in a way that Victoria's corporate employees didn't. Dutch led Cole and Harper through the middle of both groups toward the entrance. The Crestview people stared with hostility that was probably rehearsed. The farmers nodded with quiet solidarity that needed no coordination. This was community standing together because one of their own needed help, and that's what community did. Inside, the hearing room held 150 seats, and everyone was filled by 8:50. Cole sat in the 3rd row with Harper on one side and Dutch on the other. Samuel Price sat directly behind them, his presence solid and reassuring. Ruth Sanderson was 2 rows back, with the cassette player on her lap and 3 backup copies of the recording in her purse. The 5 county commissioners sat behind a raised wooden platform that gave them literal and symbolic height advantage. Chairman Robert Fletcher in the center, 58 years old, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the discomfort of a man who'd taken money he probably shouldn't have. His eyes swept the room and landed on Cole for just a moment before moving on, unable or unwilling to hold the gaze. Commissioner Daniel Holt sat to Fletcher's left, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. His hands fidgeted with papers that didn't need organizing. Whatever Victoria had paid him apparently wasn't enough to buy peace of mind. Commissioner Patricia Dawson occupied the right side, her expression carefully neutral. She'd taken Crestview money too, but seemed more comfortable with it, or at least better at hiding doubt. The 2 commissioners who hadn't taken contributions sat at the edges. James Whitmore on the far left, 65 years old, former teacher, wire-rimmed glasses, and the patient expression of someone who'd spent a career trying to make sense of complicated situations. Catherine Brennan on the far right, 52, former business owner, direct manner and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Fletcher called the hearing to order at 9 o'clock exactly. His voice carried bureaucratic flatness designed to make significant decisions sound routine. This hearing will determine whether agricultural parcel TX733B should be reclassified for residential development as proposed by Crestview Development Corporation. We'll hear from registered speakers in order of registration. 3 minutes each. Then commissioners may ask questions before voting. He looked toward the first row where Victoria sat. Ms. Crane, you may begin. Victoria rose and walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who'd made this presentation dozens of times. Every movement was calculated, every gesture practiced. She wore a charcoal suit and minimal jewelry, professional without being intimidating, authoritative without being cold. Her presentation unfolded with devastating simplicity. Economic arguments stacked like building blocks toward inevitable conclusion. 500 construction jobs over 3 years. Annual tax revenue increase of $2.3 million for the county. New schools funded. Roads improved. Emergency services expanded. 1,200 families choosing to make Weld County their home. She had charts showing projected growth. Graphs demonstrating tax benefits. Testimonials from other counties where Crestview Developments had delivered promised results. The numbers rolled out with hypnotic precision, each one larger than anything the county had seen in decades. Victoria framed the choice as progress versus stagnation, economic opportunity versus agricultural nostalgia, 500 families waiting for deeds versus one man holding on to land he didn't even live on. She never mentioned Cole by name, never acknowledged the will contest or debt manipulation or any of the tactics she'd employed over 3 years. Just painted a picture of abundant prosperity being blocked by stubborn refusal to accept inevitable change. The applause from Crestview supporters was loud and sustained, a coordinated demonstration designed to suggest consensus. Fletcher let it continue longer than necessary before gaveling for quiet. The next 40 speakers followed Victoria's script with minor variations. Crestview employees talked about jobs. Economic development consultants discussed tax revenue. A realtor explained how residential development would increase property values for existing homeowners. The words blurred together into wall of sound designed to overwhelm through repetition. By speaker 30, Fletcher was checking his watch. By speaker 40, Whitmore and Brennan were taking notes with expressions that suggested they'd heard enough. The coordinated messaging had achieved the opposite of its intended effect, revealing itself as manipulation rather than organic community support. Then Speaker 43 made a tactical error. A Crestview vice president, whose name Cole didn't catch, delivered his economic pitch and then added something that changed the room's temperature. Frankly, properties like the Bennett farm represent outdated land use that no longer serves modern economic needs. Agricultural preservation is fine in theory, but when a single family's attachment to the past blocks 500 jobs, we have to ask whose interests really matter here. Commissioner Brennan leaned forward, her voice cutting through the self-satisfied silence. Are you suggesting private property rights should be overridden for commercial development? The vice president backtracked with visible panic. That's not what I meant. Brennan's response was ice. It's exactly what you meant. Noted. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The coordinated presentation had crested and begun its decline, the repetitive messaging revealing itself as exactly what it was. Tom Fletcher took this podium as Speaker 46 and spoke with the plain authority of someone who'd earned respect through 5 decades of honest labor. My name is Tom Fletcher. I've farmed 640 acres in this county since 1978. I'm here because I know what developers don't say when they talk about economic opportunity. His voice carried to the back row without amplification. When they say outdated land use, they mean food production. The wheat from the Bennett farm feeds families in 12 states. That's not outdated, that's essential. When they talk about economic future, they don't mention what happens when farmland is gone. It's gone forever. You can't unpave a golf course and grow wheat again. This decision isn't reversible. He made eye contact with each commissioner. Hank Bennett was my neighbor for 4 decades. Good man who honored his land and his community. His grandson is doing the same. That's not holding this county hostage. That's called property rights and generational stewardship. If you override those things because a developer waives money and promises jobs, you're setting precedent that no farm in this county is safe. The applause from farmers was scattered but genuine, lacking coordinated precision but carrying weight through authenticity. Ruth Sanderson was called as Speaker 47. She carried the cassette player to the podium with the deliberate care of someone handling explosives. I'm Ruth Sanderson. I've lived next to the Bennett farm for 40 years. I want you to hear something Victoria Crane said to Lawrence Patterson in May 2022. She pressed play. The recording quality was poor, but the voices were clear enough. Patterson refusing to sell, Victoria explaining that properties had ways of becoming problematic when owners didn't cooperate. Equipment failures, tax complications, sometimes worse. The casual cruelty of someone who'd made these threats before and expected them to work. When it ended, Ruth's voice cut through the shocked silence. Lawrence Patterson sold 6 weeks after this recording, died 8 months later. His daughter told me he couldn't sleep for months. When his barn burned from electrical fire that insurance barely covered, he decided it was a sign. He sold for 20% below Victoria's original offer because by then he just wanted it to end. She looked directly at Victoria. Hank Bennett heard this recording. That's when he knew you were using the same tactics from 1994. That's when he started keeping detailed records. Because one farmer's word against a corporation means nothing. But documentation, evidence, patterns, those things matter. Victoria's lawyer objected immediately. This recording was made without consent and may not be admissible. Brennan cut him off. Colorado is one-party consent state for recordings. Ms. Sanderson was within her rights. The recording stands. Fletcher looked uncomfortable, but didn't overrule. The damage was done. Victoria's professional veneer had cracked, and underneath was something ugly. Cole was called as Speaker 48. He stood and felt Harper's hand slip into his. They walked to the podium together, their father and daughter approaching judgment. Cole adjusted the microphone and looked directly at the commissioners. My name is Cole Bennett. This is my daughter Harper. She's 9 years old. My grandfather owned the land in question for 56 years. He died 3 months ago. I'm his sole heir. He opened the folder Harper had prepared. I'm not here to talk about jobs or tax revenue. I'm here to present facts that should inform your decision. He set up his laptop and played 2 minutes from Hank's will video. The excerpt where his grandfather explained his reasoning with perfect clarity and obvious competence. On screen, Hank's voice filled the room. I chose Cole because he's the only one who understood what this land means. He worked it. He bled for it. He came back summer after summer because something in him recognized that this dirt isn't just dirt. It's memory, labor, everything our family built. Harper watched the screen with tears gathering in her eyes, seeing her great-grandfather speak truth that couldn't be argued or dismissed. When the video ended, Cole distributed campaign finance records to each commissioner. Second document, public records from Colorado Secretary of State showing campaign contributions from Crestview Development. Chairman Fletcher received $47,000. Commissioner Holt received $42,000. Commissioner Dawson received $38,000. Total of $127,000. I'm not alleging impropriety. I'm ensuring the public understands the financial relationships involved in this decision. Fletcher's face went crimson, but he said nothing. Brennan and Whitmore leaned forward with increased attention. Cole pressed play on Ruth's recording again, this time on his laptop with better audio quality. Victoria's voice threatening Patterson filled the room with casual cruelty. Third document, Timeline showing how Victoria Crane purchased my personal debt from First National Bank. $185,000 in medical expenses I incurred saving my grandfather's life. Transferred to Ridgewood Holdings LLC 1 week after he died. She now controls my debt with 90 days to pay or face property lien. The same 90 days as my custody hearing with my ex-wife. He distributed the bank transfer documents. This isn't business negotiation. This is financial coercion timed to maximize pressure. Whitmore studied the documents with visible concern. That's remarkably convenient timing. Cole handed out pages from Hank's red notebook showing shell company connections, overlapping board members, financial trails linking current operations to past criminal activity. Final document. Evidence from my grandfather's investigation connecting Crestview Development to the land fraud syndicate that operated in Colorado in the 1990s. My grandfather testified against this organization in 1994. 3 men went to federal prison. This isn't new. This is the same operation with different names and same tactics. The room erupted in whispered conversations. Fletcher struggled to restore order with his gavel. Harper tugged at Cole's jacket. He looked down and she whispered something only he could hear. "Can I show them the pictures?" Cole looked at Chairman Fletcher. "Sir, my daughter would like to address the board." Fletcher hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "This is highly unusual." Brennan cut him off. "Let the child speak." Cole adjusted the microphone down to Harper's height. She stepped forward with the folder of photographs clutched in both hands. Her voice came out clear, despite obvious nervousness. "My name is Harper Bennett. I'm in 4th grade. I want to show you what we did." She held up the first photograph pair. "This is the kitchen before. The sink was broken and we had no water. After, we fixed it together." The simplicity carried more weight than elaborate arguments. She showed window photographs, porch repairs, barn restoration, each before and after telling story about transformation through effort. "These windows, we fixed them twice. Once when we got there, then again after bad men broke them 3 nights ago." She showed the photograph from morning after the attack. "We fixed one more that morning before we came here. So you'd know we didn't quit." Her confidence built with each image. "It took us 10 weeks. We worked every day. Daddy taught me how to use a hammer and a level and a saw. I learned fractions from measuring boards. I learned about engines from fixing the tractor. I learned history from great-grandpa's notebooks." Brennan was smiling now. Whitmore taking notes with what looked like approval. "That lady said, we live in a construction zone, but we don't. We live in a home that we're building together. She said Daddy put me at risk, but Daddy taught me to call 911 when the bad men came. Daddy taught me to be safe and work hard and not give up when things are difficult." Harper's voice cracked slightly with emotion. "Mommy's house is nice, but I didn't build anything there. At the farm, I'm building a life. Great-grandpa said land belongs to the ones who understand what it means. And I understand now. It means family. It means working together. It means not giving up when things are hard." She looked directly at each commissioner. "Please don't take our home." The silence that followed was complete. Several farmers in the back were crying openly. Ruth had her hand over her mouth. Even Fletcher looked affected despite his financial obligations. Cole put his hand on Harper's shoulder. "My daughter has said what I came to say better than I could. This isn't about one property. It's about whether hard work and family legacy matter more than money and political connections. Hank Bennett kept this land for 56 years. Harper and I will keep it for 56 more. We're not selling. We're not giving up. We're going home." The room erupted in applause from farmers and scattered supporters. The sound competed with uncomfortable silence from Crestview employees who just watched a 9-year-old dismantle their carefully constructed economic argument. Then something happened that Cole hadn't expected. Marcus Bennett stood from the back row. "Mr. Chairman, may I speak?" Fletcher looked irritated. "Public comment period is over. I'm one of the plaintiffs in the will challenge. I think the board should hear what I have to say." Cole tensed, pulling Harper close. His uncle walked to the podium with the posture of a man approaching his own execution. "My name is Marcus Bennett. I'm Cole's uncle. I'm also suing to invalidate my father's will." His hands gripped the podium until knuckles went white. "And I'm here to tell you that everything Cole and Harper just presented is true. Every single word." The confession emerged with weight of truth too heavy to carry alone. "Victoria Crane approached me 6 months before my father died. She offered me $150,000 to help facilitate family communication about selling the land. I took the money. I needed it. I had debts and bad investments, and I was desperate." His voice broke. After Dad died, Victoria increased pressure, said I had to help her or she'd expose that I'd taken money while he was still alive. Breach of fiduciary duty, possible fraud. She told me what to say at the funeral, how to pressure Cole, when to file the lawsuit. I did it all because I was scared and greedy and weak. Marcus looked at Cole and Harper for the first time. But 3 nights ago, when I heard about the attack on Cole's property, I realized something. Victoria didn't just want land, she wanted to destroy anyone who stood in her way, including a 9-year-old girl who just wanted to learn how to use a hammer. He straightened slightly. I'm withdrawing from the lawsuit. Caroline can do what she wants. But I'm done, and I'm sorry. Harper surprised everyone by walking to Marcus. She looked up at him with the directness only children possess. Did you mean it? You're really sorry? Marcus knelt down. Yeah, kiddo, I really mean it. Harper processed this with visible concentration, then made decision from values Cole had tried to teach through example. Okay, Daddy says everybody deserves second chance if they really mean it. She hugged him briefly. The gesture carried more weight than forgiveness, more like permission to try becoming someone better. Victoria's phone buzzed loud enough that people 3 rows away could hear it. She checked the screen and her face went from composed to pale. The phone rang again. She stood without permission. Mr. Chairman, I need to take this. Fletcher tried to regain control. You'll remain seated. But Victoria was already answering, her voice rising with each word. You can't do that. We have a contract. She listened and her composure shattered like glass. I don't care what the board decided. After everything I've done for this project, you're making me the scapegoat. Everyone in the room was listening now to one side of conversation that revealed more than Victoria realized. This was your operation. Caldwell's operation. I'm just the broker. Another pause, her desperation bleeding through professional veneer. Please, I need this commission. I have debts. I have a daughter who's sick and needs treatment. I need it. The phone went dead in her hand. She stared at it with expression of someone watching life raft drift away, then sat down heavily. Crestview had just cut her loose, sacrificing their broker to protect themselves from evidence Cole had presented. Harper whispered to Cole, she has a sick daughter. That's sad, but it doesn't make what she did okay. No, baby, it doesn't. Commissioner Brennan broke the silence. Ms. Crane, would you like to respond to allegations about purchasing Mr. Bennett's debt? Victoria's attorney stood. My client declines to comment on private business transactions. Whitmore entered the bank documents into record. This transfer occurred November 8th. Hank Bennett passed October 31st. 1 week later. That timing raises significant questions about intent. Commissioner Holt stood abruptly, his face showing strain of divided loyalties finally becoming unbearable. Given the campaign contributions I received from Crestview, I'm recusing myself from this vote. I can't in good conscience claim impartiality. Fletcher tried to salvage something. Commissioner Holt, that's not necessary. My decision is final. Dawson looked at evidence spread before her, at Harper sitting beside Cole, at farmers in back who'd known Hank for decades. I want to state for record that campaign contributions don't influence my votes. But I also can't ignore what's been presented today. The debt manipulation, the recorded threats, the coordinated attack on the property. These aren't actions of good faith developers pursuing legitimate business interests. Fletcher made one final attempt. If we reject this rezoning, we're turning away significant economic investment. Brennan cut him off with precision of blade. No, we're protecting a property owner from predatory practices and systematic harassment. There's a difference. The vote was called at 12:37. Fletcher voted yes, alone. Brennan voted no. Whitmore voted no. Dawson voted no. Holt's recusal left the final tally at 3-1 against rezoning. Fletcher's gavel came down with finality of judgment rendered. The motion fails. Rezoning is denied. This hearing is adjourned. The sound of farmers applauding mixed with silence of Crestview employees filing out. Victoria sat motionless while her attorney gathered papers. Marcus approached Cole hesitantly, but Cole just nodded once, acknowledgement rather than absolution, and walked past with Harper's hand in his. Outside, Ruthie was crying and hugging anyone within reach. Dutch shook Cole's hand with firm grip of someone who'd fought alongside him and seen victory delivered. Harper showed her before and after photographs to farmers who examined them with appreciation of people who understood what they represented. The drive home passed in silence, broken only by Harper's occasional observations about what had happened. Commissioner Brennan was nice. Uncle Marcus was brave. The bad lady looked sad at the end. Cole processed it all with the strange detachment that comes after battles end. They'd won, against odds that had seemed impossible, against money and political connections and 3 years of systematic pressure. They'd won because Harper was brave enough to speak truth, because Marcus found courage to confess, because 15 farmers stood together, because Hank had spent 3 years documenting everything. At the farmhouse, Cole and Harper stood on the rebuilt porch looking at 900 acres of land that was still theirs. The before and after wall was visible through the kitchen window, 60 photographs telling story of transformation through labor. Harper leaned against him. "We did it, Daddy. We did. What happens now? Now we keep building, keep fixing, keep getting stronger. Because the weight doesn't get lighter?" Cole smiled despite exhaustion. "Because the weight doesn't get lighter. We just get strong enough to carry it." That night after Harper fell asleep, Cole sat at the kitchen table with Dutch reviewing what came next. The rezoning was denied, but Victoria still controlled the debt, still had 90 days until payment was due, still had connections with Kristen's lawyer in the custody battle. "We won the battle," Dutch said, "but the war isn't over." Cole looked at the chart on the wall. Days until debt due, 87. Days until custody hearing, 87. Shortfall, $166,000. They'd gotten stronger, but were they strong enough for what came next? Tomorrow would tell. The morning after the hearing arrived with the strange quiet that follows storms. Cole woke at his usual 4:30 to find Harper already in the kitchen making coffee, her small hands working the machine with the competence of someone who'd learned through watching and repetition. She wore Hank's work shirt over her pajamas, the fabric hanging to her knees, the sleeves still rolled up 6 times. She looked at him with eyes that seemed older than 9 years had any right to be. "We won, but we're not done yet, right?" Cole poured coffee into 2 mugs, added sugar to hers the way she liked it. "Right, the rezoning is blocked. But Victoria still owns the debt. We've got 87 days to find $166,000, or lose everything anyway." Harper pulled out her notebook, the one where she'd been tracking their progress since the beginning. She'd made a new page overnight with calculations in her careful handwriting. "If we save $2,000 per day for 87 days, that's $174,000. More than we need." Cole felt his chest tighten at her optimism. "Baby, we don't have income. We're living on what's left of my severance. There's no way to save $2,000 per day when we're spending $500 just to keep going." Harper studied the numbers like they were a puzzle she could solve through concentration. "Then we need to make money, not just save it. What does the farm make? Wheat, but the harvest won't come until June. That's too late." Harper processed this information with the same seriousness she'd brought to everything over the past 3 months. Great-grandpa must have made money somehow. For 56 years, how did he do it? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Cole realized he didn't actually know. Hank had always been comfortable but never wealthy, had paid bills and maintained equipment and saved enough to handle emergencies. But the mechanics of how a family farm generated sufficient income to sustain itself had never been something Cole understood. He needed to learn fast. Dutch arrived at 6 with news that changed the equation. He spread documents across the kitchen table, corporate filings and legal notices that he'd somehow obtained through connections Cole didn't question. "Victoria's in trouble, real trouble. Crestview Development fired her yesterday, terminated for cause, which means no severance. They're claiming she operated outside her authority and exposed the company to legal liability. She's also being sued personally by Richard Caldwell for breach of contract." Cole felt a twist of something that might have been sympathy. "What happens to her?" Dutch's expression was grim. "Bankruptcy, probably. She took advances against commissions she'll never earn now. Has legal fees she can't pay, medical bills for her daughter that insurance won't cover. Everything she did, all the harassment and threats and manipulation, it was to save her kid. And now she's lost everything anyway." Harper spoke quietly from her seat at the table. "That's sad, but it doesn't change what she did to great-grandpa, or to Mr. Patterson, or to us." "No, baby, it doesn't." Dutch gathered the documents back into order. "Here's what matters for you. Victoria's personal bankruptcy means the debt she bought might be sold again. Back to a bank, probably. That gives you negotiating room. Banks want money, not land. They'll take payment plans, restructuring, settlements. Victoria wanted the property. That's different." It was the first genuinely good news in 3 months. Cole felt hope rising in his chest like air after drowning. "How do I negotiate with them?" Samuel Price can handle it. He's already made preliminary contact. They're willing to discuss terms if you can show ability to make payments, which means you need income, regular demonstrable income. Which brought them back to Harper's question. How did the farm make money? Samuel Price arrived at 9 with answers that had been sitting in Hank's records the whole time. He spread agricultural reports and financial statements across the table. 3 years of documentation showing exactly how the Bennett farm had operated. Your grandfather ran a sustainable operation. Not maximum profit, but consistent returns. Wheat was primary crop. Harvest in June generated $60,000 to $70,000 in most years. But he supplemented that with lease agreements. He pointed to contracts with neighboring farmers. Hank leased equipment to 5 smaller operations. The combine, tractors, planting equipment, charged reasonable rates, made $30,000 to $40,000 per year just from equipment rental. He also had water rights that he leased to 3 adjacent properties, another $15,000 annually. Samuel showed Cole the total. Combined income averaged $125,000 per year. Expenses for fuel, maintenance, property taxes, insurance ran about $40,000. That left $85,000 net. Comfortable living for a single man with simple needs. Cole did the math in his head. If I can generate the same income, I could pay the bank $2,000 per month and clear the debt in 7 to 8 years. Samuel nodded. That's exactly the proposal I'm making to them. You take over existing lease agreements, continue the farming operation, make structured payments. They get their money with interest. You keep the land. Everyone wins except Victoria, and frankly, she's not in position to object. It sounded almost too simple. What's the catch? You have to actually do it. Run the farm, maintain equipment, honor the leases. It's full-time work, more than full-time during planting and harvest. You can't do it from Denver while working a software job. Cole looked around the kitchen they'd rebuilt, at the before and after wall showing 60 repairs completed through their own labor. At Harper watching him with trust he'd spent 3 months trying to earn. I don't have a software job anymore, and I don't want to go back to Denver. Then we have an agreement to negotiate. Over the next 2 weeks, Samuel worked with the bank that had purchased Victoria's debt portfolio. The negotiations moved slowly but steadily toward resolution. The bank agreed to payment plan, $2,000 per month for 7 years at 6% interest. Total repayment, $198,000, including interest. Payment 1 due February 1st, the same day as the custody hearing, which meant Cole needed to generate $2,000 in the next 6 weeks and prove he could sustain that income indefinitely. He started with the equipment leases. 5 farmers who'd rented machinery from Hank. All of them were willing to continue the arrangements with Cole. Tom Fletcher needed the combine for spring planting. 2 others wanted tractor access. The agreements would generate $35,000 over the next year, paid quarterly. First payment due March 1st. The water rights leases were simpler. 3 adjacent properties drew irrigation water from wells on the Bennett land. The agreements were already in place, just needed signatures transferring from Hank's estate to Cole. $15,000 per year, paid monthly. First payment due January 15th. It still wasn't enough for the February 1st deadline. Cole needed $2,000 in cash by then to make the first debt payment and prove viability to Kristen's lawyer. He had $800 in remaining severance. Harper had $217 in savings from birthdays and allowances that she offered without being asked. They needed $983 more. Dutch had a solution. Sell something. You've got equipment in that barn that Hank kept but never used. Old tractors, spare parts, scrap metal. Take it to the salvage yard in Fort Collins. Get what you can. Harper wanted to help. She went through the barn with Cole, inventorying everything that wasn't essential to current operations. A 1972 Ford tractor that hadn't run in a decade. 2 broken combines that Hank had kept for parts. Diesel tanks, fence wire, tools that duplicated other tools. Everything accumulated over 56 years of farming. They loaded Dutch's truck with 3 trips worth of salvage. The yard in Fort Collins paid by weight and condition. The old Ford tractor brought $400. The combines brought $300 combined. Scrap metal and parts brought another $400. Total, $1,100. More than they needed for the first payment. Enough to prove they could generate income when necessary. Cole drove home with Harper beside him in the truck and $1,100 in cash in his wallet. It wasn't wealth, wasn't even security, but it was proof that the farm could sustain them if they worked hard enough and smart enough. Harper counted the money twice to make sure. We did it, Daddy. We can make the first payment. Cole felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for 3 months. Yeah, baby, we can. The custody hearing arrived on February 1st with the weight of everything hanging in balance. Cole dressed in the same suit he'd worn to Hank's funeral in the county hearing. Harper wore her navy dress and Hank's work shirt, the combination that had become her armor against a world that asked too much of 9-year-olds. They drove to the courthouse in Denver with Samuel Price following in his own car. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock in front of Judge Michelle Torres, who had a reputation for fairness, but also for prioritizing child welfare over parental preferences. If she thought Harper was better off with Kristen, no amount of financial documentation would change her mind. The courtroom was smaller than Cole expected, more like a conference room with a judge's bench. Kristen sat on one side with her attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Kemp, who specialized in custody modification cases. Derek sat beside Kristen wearing an expensive suit and the confident expression of someone who thought victory was inevitable. Cole and Samuel took seats on the opposite side. Harper sat between them, small and serious, holding Mr. Ears under one arm because the judge had agreed she could bring one comfort item. Judge Torres entered at 10 exactly. She was 55 years old with gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that looked like they'd seen every variation of family tragedy and weren't impressed by any of it. She reviewed the case file for 3 minutes before speaking. This is a modification hearing regarding custody of Harper Jane Bennett. Mother is requesting full physical custody, with father receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. Father opposes modification and seeks to maintain current arrangement. Ms. Kemp, you may present your case. Patricia Kemp stood and delivered her argument with the precision of someone who'd made similar presentations hundreds of times. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett has demonstrated a pattern of instability that makes the current custody arrangement inappropriate. He lost his employment 6 months ago. He's living in a farmhouse that was condemned for code violations. He's involved in ongoing litigation over a property inheritance. He took the child out of school for extended periods and exposed her to unsafe living conditions during property renovation. Most concerning, there was a violent incident at the property on November 28th involving 3 men who broke windows and damaged equipment while the child was present. She presented photographs taken from the road showing the farmhouse at its worst. Broken windows visible, porch sagging, paint peeling. The images were damning even though Cole knew they showed the property before most repairs were completed. Mr. Hansen has offered to provide a stable home environment. The child would have her own room, attend excellent schools, and be removed from the ongoing conflict surrounding the property. Mother has steady employment in a secure living situation. This modification is clearly in the child's best interest. Judge Torres looked at the photographs, then at Cole. Mr. Bennett, do you have response to these allegations? Samuel Price stood. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to present evidence that directly refutes Ms. Kemp's characterization of Mr. Bennett's situation. Permission granted. Samuel set up a laptop and projector. The first image that appeared was Harper's before and after wall, 60 photographs arranged in chronological order, showing systematic transformation of the property from neglect to functionality. These photos document 10 weeks of intensive repair work completed by Mr. Bennett and his daughter. Every broken window replaced. The porch completely rebuilt to code. Kitchen and bathroom plumbing upgraded. Roof repaired. Barn renovated. The property is no longer condemned. In fact, it passed county inspection on January 15th as shown in this certificate. He handed the inspection certificate to Judge Torres. Regarding employment, Mr. Bennett has established a sustainable agricultural operation. He's assumed management of the family farm, including equipment leases and water rights agreements that generate $100,000 annually. Here are the executed contracts. Samuel distributed copies showing signatures and payment terms. As for the violent incident, Mr. Bennett properly reported it to law enforcement. His daughter, showing remarkable presence of mind, called 911. The perpetrators were never identified, but the incident was documented. Rather than demonstrating poor judgment, Mr. Bennett's response shows appropriate crisis management. Judge Torres studied the documents carefully. Ms. Kemp, do you have rebuttal? Patricia Kemp looked less confident than before. Your Honor, even if Mr. Bennett has improved the property and established income, the fact remains that he removed the child from her established school and social environment. The child missed 3 weeks of classes during the renovation period. That demonstrates prioritization of property over child welfare. Samuel responded immediately. The child was enrolled at Ridgeway Elementary during that period. Attendance records show she missed 4 days total, and all with proper documentation. Her grades remained excellent. She's actually ahead in mathematics due to practical application of skills during renovation projects. Judge Torres looked directly at Harper. Young lady, I'd like to ask you some questions. Is that okay? Harper nodded seriously. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand what this hearing is about? It's about where I live. With mommy or with daddy? And what would you like? Harper's answer came clear and certain. I want to live with daddy at great-grandpa's farm. Can you tell me why? Harper thought carefully about her words. Mommy's house is nice. Everything is clean and organized. I have a big room with lots of toys. But at the farm, I'm building something. Daddy and I fixed 60 things together. He taught me how to measure and cut and use tools safely. I learned that hard work matters, that fixing broken things is better than throwing them away. She pulled out a small photo album that Samuel had helped her prepare. This is what we did. Window by window, board by board, every repair I helped with. Great-grandpa said land belongs to people who understand what it means. I understand now. It means not giving up even when things are hard. Judge Torres examined the photo album with an expression that was impossible to read. Are you happy at the farm? Harper's response was immediate. Yes, ma'am. Really happy. Happier than I've been in a long time. Even though you have to work? Even though there are chores and responsibilities? Especially because of that. At mommy's house, I'm just a kid. At the farm, I'm building my life. The words hung in the courtroom like a verdict delivered by the only person whose opinion truly mattered. Judge Torres set down the photo album and looked at Kristen. Ms. Bennett, do you have anything you'd like to add? Kristen stood slowly. She glanced at Derek, who was making a small gesture that clearly meant stick to the plan. But Kristen looked at Harper and something in her expression changed. Your Honor, I want what's best for my daughter. I thought that meant stability and security and all the things Derek's home provides. But I drove to the farm in November, watched them working on the porch, saw Harper teaching Cole how to measure something because she'd learned it and he hadn't. Her voice caught slightly. She was happy, really happy, and I realized I'd been confusing comfort with well-being. Harper doesn't need a perfect house. She needs a father who teaches her that effort matters, that commitment matters, that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds are impossible. Patricia Kemp touched Kristen's arm, trying to stop her, but Kristen kept talking. I'm withdrawing my petition for modification. The current custody arrangement is working. Harper is thriving. That's all that matters. Derek stood abruptly. Kristen, we discussed this. Kristen looked at him with something like pity. I know what we discussed, but she's my daughter, and I'm not going to take her away from the first place she's felt truly at home in years. Judge Torres watched this exchange with an expression that suggested she'd seen similar reversals before. Ms. Bennett, are you certain? Once we proceed on this basis, the modification petition is dismissed. I'm certain, Your Honor. Judge Torres closed the case file. Then this hearing is concluded. The existing custody arrangement remains in effect. Ms. Bennett retains primary physical custody, with Mr. Bennett having parenting time every other weekend and extended time during summer. Mr. Bennett, I expect you to maintain the improvements you've made to the property and the income you've established. If circumstances change significantly, either party may petition for modification. But for now, the child's best interests are served by stability and the existing arrangement. She looked at Harper. Young lady, you're very fortunate to have parents who both love you enough to put your needs first. Don't take that for granted. Harper nodded solemnly. I won't, ma'am. Outside the courthouse, Kristen approached Cole while Derek waited by their car with barely concealed frustration. I'm sorry, for a lot of things, but mostly for assuming you'd fail. Cole found he had no anger left. You were protecting her. That's what good mothers do. She's happier with you, I can admit that now. She's happy with both of us. She just needs different things at different times. Kristen smiled sadly. When did you get so wise? When I had to. When the alternative was losing everything that mattered. Harper appeared between them and hugged them both simultaneously, her small arms barely reaching around. Thank you, Mommy. Thank you for letting me stay with Daddy. Kristen wiped her eyes. You're welcome, baby. Just promise me you'll be careful. No more broken windows. Harper grinned. I'll try. But sometimes building things means breaking things first. 3 days later, Cole made the first payment to the bank. $2,000 withdrawn from the account he'd opened with the salvage money and first equipment lease payment. The bank teller processed it like any routine transaction, unaware that this $2,000 represented the difference between keeping a legacy and losing everything Hank had built over 56 years. Samuel Price filed the restructuring agreement making the payment plan official. 7 years of monthly payments. Interest calculated quarterly. Strict terms but manageable if the farm operations continued as projected. Dutch helped Cole implement Hank's operating procedures. The equipment leases required maintenance and scheduling. The water rights needed monitoring to ensure proper usage. The spring planting would require hiring temporary labor because Cole couldn't manage 900 acres alone. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and exactly what Cole needed. Purpose, direction, the satisfaction that came from building something tangible rather than managing code that existed only as abstractions in computer memory. Harper threw herself into farm life with the enthusiasm of someone finally allowed to do work that mattered. She learned to drive the pickup truck on private roads, her feet barely reaching the pedals, even with the seat pulled all the way forward. Dutch taught her equipment maintenance, how to check oil and change filters and diagnose problems before they became failures. The before and after wall in the kitchen grew beyond repairs to include farm operations. Harper documented everything. First equipment rental payment received, spring planting contract signed, water rights inspection passed. Each small victory photographed and labeled and added to the visual record of transformation. Marcus called in April with news about Caroline. They'd separated. The stress of the lawsuit and his confession in the financial problems had been too much. But Marcus sounded relieved rather than devastated, like he'd been carrying weight he could finally put down. I'm working construction now. Physical labor. It's honest work. Probably should have done this 30 years ago. Cole heard something in his uncle's voice that hadn't been there before. Peace, maybe, or at least the possibility of peace. You are welcome to visit. See what Harper and I have built. I'd like that. Soon, when I'm ready to face the place Dad loved and I tried to destroy. The conversation ended with promises neither of them was sure they'd keep, but both hoped they would. Victoria's bankruptcy finalized in May. Dutch brought the news along with coffee and donuts for Harper, who'd started joining their morning strategy sessions because she understood farm operations better than Cole did at this point. Everything she had is gone. House sold to pay legal fees. Daughter's medical expenses being covered by state assistance. She's living with her sister in Nevada, working as a claims adjuster for half what she made at Crestview. Cole felt no satisfaction in it. And Caldwell, still running Crestview. Different broker, different tactics, but same operation. He's going after farmland in Wyoming now. Won't face consequences unless someone fights him there the way you fought him here. Dutch pulled out a folder filled with newspaper clippings and legal documents. But here's what matters. Your fight changed things. County passed new regulations on agricultural zoning. Requires environmental impact studies before residential conversion. Makes it much harder for developers to force sales through harassment. 3 other farmers facing similar pressure used your case as precedent. 2 of them won. He spread the articles across the table. Your grandfather spent 56 years protecting this land. You spent 3 months protecting his legacy. But the real legacy is showing other people how to fight. That matters more than 900 acres. Harper studied the articles with her serious expression. Great-grandpa would be proud. Yeah, baby, he would. The first harvest under Cole's management came in June. Tom Fletcher brought his crew to help with the combine operation because Cole was still learning and couldn't afford mistakes. The work started at dawn and continued until after dark for 2 weeks straight. 900 acres of wheat cut and processed and hauled to the grain elevator and in Fort Collins. The final tally came to $68,000. Not as much as Hank's best years, but respectable for a first harvest managed by someone learning on the job. After expenses for fuel and temporary labor and equipment maintenance, Cole cleared $42,000. More than enough to make debt payments through the year with surplus for winter expenses. Harper insisted on documenting the harvest the same way she documented repairs. Photos of the combine running, the trucks loaded with grain, the check from the grain elevator. She added them to the wall with labels that told the story. First harvest, our work, great-grandpa's dream continuing. On the 1-year anniversary of Hank's death, Cole and Harper drove to the farm entrance with a sign they'd commissioned from a woodworker in Fort Collins. The oak came from a tree Hank had planted in 1968, the year he'd taken over the farm from his own father. The letters were carved deep and filled with black paint guaranteed to last 20 years. They installed it together using techniques learned over 12 months of constant repair and building. Harper held the post steady while Cole mixed concrete, both of them working with practiced efficiency that would have made Hank proud. The sign read Bennett Family Farm, established 1968, in memory of James Hank Bennett, 1940 to 2024. Below the dates was one line from Hank's letter, the words that had carried them through impossible battles. Legacy is not money. Legacy is choice. Harper placed white chrysanthemums at the base, the same flowers she'd carried at the funeral. She stood back and studied their work with satisfaction. Daddy, I understand now what great-grandpa meant. What's that? It's not about the land. It's about what we did with the land. We built a home. We built a family. We built a life that matters. Cole pulled her close. This daughter who'd found evidence and called 911 and stood before commissioners to speak truth with photographs as her only weapon. Who'd learned fractions from measuring boards and engines, from fixing tractors, and courage from watching her father refuse to surrender. The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger. Harper looked up at him. Are we strong enough now? Cole looked at the farmhouse standing whole behind them, every window gleaming, every board solid, the porch rebuilt, the barn painted, 900 acres stretching toward mountains that had witnessed 3 generations of Bennetts refusing to quit. Yeah, baby, we're strong enough. They stood together as the sun set over the land that had been fought for and earned and would be passed forward to Harper someday when she was ready to carry the weight. The before and after wall was visible through the kitchen window. 97 photographs now documenting transformation that went deeper than repairs. That night, Cole sat at Hank's table with Harper doing homework beside him and felt something he hadn't felt in the years since the divorce. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, because farming was constant struggle against weather and markets and equipment failures. But peace that came from knowing the struggle had purpose. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. A woman's voice came through, tentative and uncertain. Mr. Bennett, this is Victoria Crane. I don't expect you to talk to me. I wouldn't blame you for hanging up. But I needed to say something. Cole waited, saying nothing. I'm sorry for everything I did to you and your family, for threatening your grandfather, for buying your debt, for putting your daughter in danger. I told myself it was necessary to save my daughter. But that was a lie. It was greed disguised as desperation. I had choices. I made wrong ones. And I'm sorry. The line went quiet. Cole could hear her breathing, waiting for response. How's your daughter? Victoria's voice broke slightly. She's in remission. Full remission. The state insurance covered treatment I thought I needed millions for. Turns out I destroyed families and my career and my integrity for money I didn't actually need. Cole felt the weight of that realization. I'm glad she's okay. Truly. I don't deserve that kindness. Probably not. But my daughter taught me that everybody deserves second chances if they really mean it. Do you mean it? A long pause. Yes. I'm working with the Attorney General's office now, providing evidence against Richard Caldwell, testifying about the whole operation. It won't undo what I did, but maybe it prevents him from doing it to others. That's good. That matters. Mr. Bennett, one more thing. Your grandfather, when he testified in 1994, he could have taken deals, could have profited from the information he gave. He chose integrity instead. I read the transcripts. He said something I keep thinking about. That land isn't real estate, it's trust. Trust from the people who worked it before us. Trust for the people who'll work it after. I didn't understand that then, but I do now. She hung up before Cole could respond. Harper had been listening. Was that the bad lady? Yeah, baby. Is she still bad? Cole thought about it. I think she's trying to be better. That's all anyone can do. The weeks turned to months, turned to a year. The farm settled into rhythms that had sustained it for 6 decades. Spring planting, summer maintenance, fall harvest, winter planting. The cycles that connected them to land and weather in the fundamental realities that had governed agriculture since humans first decided to stop hunting and start growing. Harper turned 10 in March, celebrated with a party in the barn that 15 farmer families attended. She was taller now, growing into the work shirt she wore constantly. Still asked endless questions, but increasingly knew the answers from experience rather than needing to be taught. Cole received an email in April from TechCore Solutions. They were hiring again, wanted to know if he'd consider returning at his old salary, plus 20%. The offer was generous, would solve any remaining financial concerns, would mean moving back to Denver and the life he'd had before. He declined without hesitation. Marcus visited in May, the first time since the hearing. He walked through the farmhouse seeing all the repairs, touching the before and after wall with reverent fingers. When he saw Hank's restored study with the red notebook sitting on the desk in a glass case, he broke down crying. "I'm so sorry, Dad, for everything I didn't understand, for everything I tried to destroy." Cole put a hand on his uncle's shoulder. He knew. Hank knew people make mistakes. He cared about what they did after. Marcus stayed for 3 days helping with fence repairs. The physical labor was good for him. Gave them time to talk about things that had been left unsaid for too long. By the time he left, they'd agreed to stay in contact. Maybe even rebuild what family could look like when both people tried. The second harvest came in June and exceeded the first. $72,000 before expenses, $50,000 after, enough to make debt payments with surplus for equipment upgrades, enough to prove the operation was sustainable long-term, enough to know they'd actually made it. On a morning in late June, Cole woke to find Harper already outside watching the sunrise from the rebuilt porch. She sat in one of the rocking chairs with Mr. Ears under her arm, looking at 900 acres painted gold by early light. He sat beside her in the other chair. "What are you thinking about?" Harper was quiet for a moment. "When I grow up, will I take care of the farm? If you want to, that'll be your choice. Same choice great-grandpa gave me." She thought about this seriously. "I want to. I want to teach my kids how to fix windows and drive tractors and understand what legacy means." Cole felt his throat tighten. He'd be proud of you. Is proud of you wherever he is. They sat together watching the sun climb higher, painting the wheat fields in shades of gold that made everything look possible. Behind them, the farmhouse stood solid, every repair holding, every board bearing weight. Inside, the before and after wall told the story of transformation through labor. 97 photographs documenting the truth that broken things could be made whole by people who refused to accept that money mattered more than meaning. Legacy is not money. Legacy is choice. And they had chosen. To fight when fighting seemed impossible. To build when building seemed futile. To stand together when the world pushed them to surrender. To get stronger under weight that never got lighter. The sun rose higher. The day began. And somewhere in the morning light, Cole could almost hear Hank's voice carried on wind that crossed 900 acres of land held in trust for those who came after. The weight doesn't get lighter. You get stronger. And sometimes if you're very fortunate and very stubborn and very brave, you get strong enough to carry it forward for the next generation who'll carry it after you. They were strong enough now, both of them, together, and that was legacy enough for anyone.